Greetings everyone, this is Savage Harry. Prepare yourselves for what if Naruto was sent to Hogwarts and Tsunade came with him? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Let's begin. Chapter 1, The Wrong Door. The seal exploded at 3:47 in the afternoon. Naruto knew the exact time because he'd been staring at the clock on the wall of the Uzumaki ceiling archive. A clock that Tsunade had personally installed and personally threatened to break over someone's head if they were ever late to a diplomatic briefing again, when the scroll on the table began to scream. Not metaphorically. The scroll screamed, in the voice of its dying author, sealing master Hiroshi Namikawa, who had apparently spent the last 6 months of his life transcribing a dimensional compression seal so complex that even the Third Hokage had once described Hiroshi as a man I respect entirely and understand approximately 30% of. The scroll unfurled itself across the stone floor, characters blazing gold and then a deep arterial red, and Naruto had exactly enough time to look up at Tsunade and say, "That doesn't look right," before the room folded. Not collapsed, not exploded. Folded like someone had grabbed the corners of reality and pressed them together the way you'd close a book, and then the book opened somewhere else entirely. The landing was not graceful. Naruto hit mud first. He knew it was mud because it was cold, it smelled like wet earth and sheep, and when he pushed himself upright his hands sank to the wrists. He was on a hillside. Green, aggressively, almost violently green. The kind of green that only existed in places that got rained on constantly and had strong feelings about it. The sky above him was the color of a bruise, heavy and purple-gray, and the wind coming off whatever massive body of water was somewhere to his left had teeth in it. Tsunade landed 3 feet to his right and somehow, through a combination of supernatural reflexes and what Naruto could only describe as sheer personal dignity, managed to land on her feet. She stood in the mud in her green haori, arms crossed, surveying the landscape with the expression of a woman who had seen too much to be surprised by anything but was currently making an exception. "Where?" she said very calmly. "Are we?" "Scotland," said a voice. They both turned. There was a man sitting on a rock 20 meters up the hill. He was very old, old in the way that mountains were old, not decrepit but settled, like time had simply agreed to work around him. He had a long silver beard, half-moon glasses, and robes that were a specific shade of purple that suggested he had strong opinions about clothing and zero concerns about what other people thought of those opinions. He was watching them with bright blue eyes that were doing several things at once, analyzing, calculating, wondering, all of it wrapped up in an expression of absolute and unhurried delight. "Scotland," Tsunade repeated. "Northern Highlands specifically," the man said. "About 40 kilometers from Inverness, if that's helpful." He paused. "I suspect it isn't." Naruto stared at him. The man stared back, still smiling that patient smile, and Naruto felt his chakra sense reaching out automatically. The habit of 15 years of ninja training, always reading the room, always taking the measure of what was in it, and stopped dead. The man on the rock had no chakra. None. But he had something else, something that moved through him the way chakra moved through a sensor nin, warm and deep and old, with texture to it like river water over stone. It wasn't chakra. It was something adjacent to it in the way that a river was adjacent to an ocean, related but different in ways that mattered. "You can sense it," the old man said, and he sounded genuinely pleased. "Interesting. Most people can't, even other wizards." "Wizard," Tsunade said flatly. "Albus Dumbledore," the man said, inclining his head. "Headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry." He looked at Naruto. "And you, young man, arrived through a dimensional compression seal that hasn't been successfully executed in approximately 400 years. The last person who tried it ended up in the Baltic Sea." He tilted his head. "You seem to have done rather better." "I didn't do anything," Naruto said. "The scroll did it." "Ah," Dumbledore nodded thoughtfully. "A posthumous trigger, yes, that would explain the signature. Remarkable craftsman, whoever wrote it." He stood, and despite his age the movement was easy, unhurried. "Well, you're here now, that's generally where one starts." Tsunade looked at Naruto. Naruto looked at Tsunade. She had the look she got when she was running calculations, threat assessment, resource inventory, exit strategy, and he'd learned years ago to give her a moment for it. He turned back to Dumbledore and said, "Can you get us home?" "Not immediately," Dumbledore said, with what seemed like genuine regret. "Dimensional compression seals of that complexity require a period of, let's call it, settlement. The pathways they open need time to stabilize before they can be traversed again in the opposite direction." He looked thoughtful. "Several weeks at minimum, possibly 2 months." 2 months, Tsunade said. "I'm sorry. She was quiet for a long moment. Naruto watched her jaw tighten and then deliberately release. He'd seen her do that 1,000 times, the moment where she chose consciously to put the grief or the fury into a box and deal with what was in front of her instead. She was the best leader he'd ever seen, and she'd never once let him watch the cost of it, but he was a censor and she'd stopped remembering that. 2 months, she said again, differently this time. Decision made. Fine, then we need shelter, information, and a way to communicate with our people. I can offer shelter and information readily, Dumbledore said. Communication may be more complicated. He looked at Naruto with something that might have been amusement. I don't suppose either of you has experience with owls. The path to Hogsmeade Station took 40 minutes on foot and Naruto spent most of it cataloging the countryside. He was a shinobi. He cataloged things. The terrain was defensible in some places and utterly exposed in others. Those long, sweeping hillsides would be a nightmare in a firefight. No cover wind that would murder any precision throw over distance. The light was different from home. Flatter, like it was coming through gauze. The air tasted like rain and salt and something green and alive that he didn't have a word for. Dumbledore walked beside him and said very little, which Naruto respected. Most people who had questions about him couldn't stop asking them. This man seemed content to simply notice things and let the silence be comfortable. Tsunade walked slightly ahead of both of them, which was how she always walked, taking point on principle, leaving no ambiguity about who was in charge. Your companion, Dumbledore said quietly to Naruto, is extraordinary. She's the Fifth Hokage, Naruto said, strongest kunoichi alive. Probably the best medical ninja in history, he paused. Also, she will absolutely punch you through a wall if you underestimate her, and the wall will lose. I had gathered something of that nature, Dumbledore said serenely. And you, Naruto looked at him. What about me? What are you? It was a strange question. Not who, not where are you from, but what? Naruto turned it over for a moment, genuinely considering it, because Dumbledore had asked it like it meant something real and he deserved a real answer. A ninja, he said. Jinchuriki, container for the nine-tailed fox. He watched Dumbledore's face and saw nothing change except a slight deepening of attention. Future Hokage. Maybe, he grinned. Definitely. A container, Dumbledore said slowly, for a nine-tailed fox. His name is Kurama. Does he have opinions about where you've ended up? Naruto tilted his head, listening for a moment to the rumble that was always present somewhere in the back of his consciousness, deep and warm and fundamentally irritable. Tell the old man I find this entire situation undignified, Kurama said, and if he tries to put a leash on us, I will personally reduce his hat collection to ash. He says hello, Naruto said. Dumbledore's eyes crinkled at the corners. Please pass along my regards. The Hogwarts Express was waiting at Hogsmeade Station, steam rising into the gray afternoon, and Dumbledore had apparently communicated their arrival by some method Naruto hadn't seen, possibly one of those owls, because there was already a stern-faced woman in emerald green robes standing at the platform with an expression that suggested she had been told to expect the unexpected and was personally offended by it. Professor McGonagall, Dumbledore said pleasantly. May I introduce Tsunade and Naruto? They've had rather a journey. McGonagall looked at them. Her gaze went to Tsunade's Haori, to the diamond mark on her forehead, to the casual authority with which she stood, and then to Naruto, who was still brushing mud off his sleeve and grinning with the serene confidence of someone who had never once in his life found another person genuinely intimidating. Something shifted in her expression, not warmth exactly, but the particular kind of reassessment that meant she'd clocked something real. Welcome to Scotland, she said, and it was crisp and precise and just barely on the right side of genuine. Please try not to be alarmed by the moving staircases. Moving staircases, Naruto said. Cool, she blinked. She had clearly expected a different reaction. Yes, well. The castle appeared out of the mist like something from a story which Naruto supposed it was just not one of his. It came out of the landscape rather than sitting on top of it, towers rising from the rock as though the rock had grown them, windows burning warm gold against the gray sky, and the lake below it flat and black and enormous. He felt Kurama stir at the sight of it, something almost like interest moving through the usually sarcastic entity. Old, Kurama said, very old, there's something under it. What kind of something? Don't know yet. Pay attention. He always paid attention, he just sometimes looked like he wasn't. The inside of the castle was exactly as promised, and then significantly more. Moving portraits that watched him with genuine curiosity as he passed. Staircases that shifted direction with cheerful indifference to where you wanted to go. torches that burned without any visible fuel source and gave off light with a warmth that reminded him faintly of chakra without being chakra. The stone walls were thick enough to be their own weather system. The whole place smelled like old wood and candle wax and something herbal that Tsunade identified without looking as at least 9 different medicinal plants and one that shouldn't be grown indoors without ventilation. Dumbledore gave them rooms in the guest quarters of the West Tower. The rooms were comfortable in a way that felt genuine rather than performed, thick wool blankets, a fire that seemed to know when to be bigger, a desk and a window that looked out over the lake. Naruto sat on the bed, bounced once experimentally, and then felt the exhaustion of the day hit him all at once. It had been 3:47 when the scroll screamed. It was now nearly midnight Scotland time, which meant his body had no idea what was happening. He lay back and stared at the stone ceiling. "You're not sleeping," Kurama observed. "Neither are you." "I don't sleep. I exist in a state of highly aware resentment." A pause. "That seal under the castle, it's chakra-based. Old, dormant but not dead." Another pause, longer this time. "Someone tried to do something complicated a very long time ago and didn't finish it. What happened to them?" "What always happens," Kurama said with something that on anyone else Naruto might have called weariness. "They ran out of time." He fell asleep thinking about seals. He woke up to a knock at the door. It was Tsunade, already dressed, holding 2 cups of something hot that a house elf had apparently appeared in her room to deliver at 6 in the morning, which she described as the most startling and efficient service I've ever encountered, and I still nearly put it through the floor on reflex. She handed him a cup. It turned out to be tea, strong enough to strip paint, and sat in the chair by the fire with the particular posture of someone who had been awake for a while and was processing. "Dumbledore wants to talk," she said, formally, "about what we do while we're stuck here. What do you think he's going to propose?" She looked at her tea. "He's going to offer us a place here. Something structured, something that gives us access to their resources and their information about the seal system." She took a sip. "And something that gives him access to us. He's not trying to trap us," Naruto said. "I know he isn't." She said it without hesitation. "He's curious and he's careful and he genuinely wants to help. That doesn't mean his interests and ours are perfectly aligned." She looked at him. "He has a school full of children and something threatening them that he doesn't fully understand. We show up from nowhere, we're a resource to him. I don't blame him for it, I'd do the same, but we need to know what we're walking into." Naruto nodded. He drank his tea. It was horrible and he drank all of it anyway. "The school year starts in 2 days, Tsunade continued. 300 students arriving by train." She paused. "Naruto, yeah, you're going to want to be their friend. Obviously, every single one of them. Also obviously," she almost smiled. It was the closest thing to soft she'd let herself be since the scroll screamed, and he caught it and filed it away carefully the way he filed away all the things she thought nobody noticed. "I know," she said. "I'm not telling you to stop. I'm telling you to be smart about it. There's something happening in this school. I could feel it in the stones when we walked in. Something old and complicated and not currently in anyone's control." Kurama said the same thing. She set down her cup. "How long has he been awake?" "The whole time." She nodded, unsurprised. Tsunade had always treated Kurama with a matter-of-factness that Naruto found privately moving, not dismissive, not odd, just there he is, hello, what does he know? Tell him I want a briefing when he has more. "Tell her I'm not her intelligence asset," Kurama said with the exact tone of someone who was absolutely about to give a briefing and simply wanted credit for choosing to. "He says sure," Naruto said. The formal meeting with Dumbledore happened in his office, which was a circular room at the top of a tower that contained more information per square meter than most libraries Naruto had seen: books, instruments, portraits of sleeping old men and women who woke up and stared when the door opened. A magnificent bird on a perch that Naruto identified as a phoenix about 2 seconds before it trilled a single note, and he felt the sound move through him like a hand pressed flat against something sore. "The Kyuubi seal." The sound touched it and then passed on, gentle and oddly reassuring, like the bird had checked and found everything in order. Kurama said. From Kurama could mean anything from interesting to "I want to eat that bird," but the tone this time was closer to "I respect that creature and find it unsettling." Dumbledore sat behind his desk, hands folded, and presented his proposal with the unhurried clarity of someone who had thought it through thoroughly and had no interest in dressing it up. They could stay at Hogwarts for the duration of their involuntary visit. Tsunade would be given official status as a visiting Mediwitch consultant, a role that would give her access to the hospital wing, the library, and the faculty. Naruto would attend as a student, which would allow him access to— "No," said Naruto. Dumbledore looked at him over his glasses. No, not as a student, I don't need to be sorted into a house or go to potions class. He leaned forward slightly. I'll be here, I'll go to classes if something interests me, but I'm not here to learn your magic, I've got my own. He met Dumbledore's eyes directly, no challenge in it, just simple statement of fact. I'd be better as someone who can move around freely, help where it's needed. You've got something going on in this school, I don't know what yet, but I know it's real and I'm going to find it whether I'm a student or not. He paused. I'd rather do it with your cooperation. The silence lasted about 4 seconds. That, Dumbledore said, is remarkably perceptive for someone who arrived in a mudslide 12 hours ago. I landed in the mud, the slide part was optional. Dumbledore's eyes crinkled. He looked at Tsunade. Your thoughts, his instincts are correct, she said. The formal student framework would limit him in ways that wouldn't serve either of you. She crossed her legs, completely at ease in the enormous chair, the same way she was completely at ease everywhere. I'll take the consultant role. I have questions about your healing practices that will probably horrify me but could theoretically result in something useful for both sides. A pause. I'll need full access to your medical library, all of it, including whatever's in the restricted section that relates to physical or biological magic. That's a significant request. I'm a significant person, Tsunade said pleasantly. Dumbledore's smile was genuine this time, and something in it actually acknowledged her as a peer. Naruto saw her notice it. He saw her decide not to react to it, but she'd noticed. The train arrived on September 1st, and the castle filled up in under 3 hours. Naruto watched from the window of the entrance hall as the students flooded in. Hundreds of them, damp from the rain that had started falling over the lake, carrying owls and cats, and in one memorable case a toad that appeared deeply uncertain about its life choices. They were young. Most of them were so young. 13, 14, 15 children in school uniforms carrying the weight of a world they'd been told was safe that clearly wasn't, in the way that all children carried things adults thought they'd hidden. He recognized that weight. He'd carried his version of it since he was 4 years old. McGonagall appeared beside him, which he'd noticed she did materialized slightly like a cat. The first years will be sorted shortly, she said. 6th and 7th years are already in the Great Hall. I should warn you, she paused, choosing words, that your presence will attract attention. Yeah, he said, it usually does. She looked at him. You're not concerned about it. Should I be? She was quiet for a moment, then very precisely she said, some students may be hostile. The current political climate has made certain kinds of prejudice socially acceptable again, and students from outside our world, our magical world are sometimes treated as... She stopped. Lesser, Naruto said. The word landed clean and she didn't flinch from it. Yes, he thought about the first day he'd walked through Konoha as a child, the eyes that slid away, the mothers who pulled their children back, the shopkeeper who'd sold him a broken bowl at full price and looked satisfied about it. He thought about what he'd done with that, what he decided at some point between 5 years old and now that it meant. That's fine, he said. I'm patient. She studied him for another moment. Yes, she said slowly, I believe you are. The sorting was Naruto's idea, and in hindsight he recognized it was probably Dumbledore's too. They'd arrived at it independently, which meant it was either a great idea or a terrible one that two very different kinds of smart people had converged on. The logic was simple. Sorting Naruto would introduce him to the school in a controlled way, give him an anchor point, make him less anomaly and more person, and also this was Naruto's honest reason. He was genuinely curious what the hat would say. He walked into the great hall behind the first years and the sound dropped in layers, like someone turning down a dial. Not silence, the hall was huge, easily 500 people. 4 longhouse tables and a staff table at the front, an enchanted ceiling showing the stormy sky outside, but the particular quality of attention that meant everyone had just noticed something and was deciding what to think about it. He was taller than the first years by nearly a head. He was in his traveling clothes, black shinobi gear, his Konoha headband tied at his forehead, the Uzumaki spiral on his shoulder. He looked like what he was, which was a person from somewhere else entirely, and he walked to the front of the hall with his hands easy at his sides and his chin level and his grin wide enough to be legible from the back row. He heard whispering. He caught pieces of it. Who is that? What's with his face, those marks on his cheeks? Is that a headband? What school is he from? And he let it wash off him the way he'd learned to let a lot of things wash off because you couldn't fight a tide and you shouldn't bother trying. McGonagall placed the hat on his head. It was a very strange sensation. Not physically, the hat was just a hat, old and slightly scratchy, but the moment it settled it was like something leaned in, and he felt it press against the edges of his mind with a careful exploratory curiosity that was entirely unlike anything he'd experienced. Sensor Nin read chakra. Yamanaka could enter minds with permission. This was different, it was more like being read, the way you read a person across a room from their posture and their eyes and the way they held their hands. He let it. He'd never had anything to hide, The hat went quiet for a long moment. Then he heard it in his head in a voice that was like the castle itself, old stone and torchlight and centuries of accumulated knowing. Well, it said, that's new. He almost laughed. Yeah, I get that a lot. Nine-Tails, the hat said, not alarmed, just noting it, or rather one, the other 8. We're complicated, Naruto said. I can see that. A pause. You've been a soldier, you've been a weapon, you've been a symbol. Another pause. You are currently right now in this moment none of those things. I'm just me, he said. Yes, the hat said, and something in its voice shifted into something that might have been, if hats were capable of it, a kind of wonder. You are. That's extraordinarily rare, you know. Most people I sort are trying to be something. You're already at paused again. Trouble sorting me. Trouble is the wrong word, the hat said. Every house would be better for having you. And you'd be fully yourself in any of them, a beat. That's not actually a sorting problem, that's the opposite of one. Then just pick, Naruto said. I don't mind, I know you don't, that's why this is so difficult. Something shifted in the voice, became slightly more present. There's a boy at the Gryffindor table, scar on his forehead. He's been carrying his loneliness so long he's forgotten it has a shape anymore. And there's a girl at the Ravenclaw table who's been the cleverest person in every room she's ever entered, and has never once had a real intellectual equal. And there's a boy at the Slytherin table who's been performing a role for so long he doesn't know if there's anything underneath it. Naruto looked out at the hall. He found Harry Potter immediately. He'd been told what to look for, and anyway the kid had a quality of careful containment that Naruto recognized from looking in mirrors. He found Hermione Granger at Ravenclaw, back straight, watching him with the intensity of someone taking notes. He found Draco Malfoy at Slytherin, face arranged in an expression of magnificent boredom that was absolutely doing overtime covering something else. Yeah, Naruto said, I see them. I know you do, the hat said, and then louder so the whole hall heard it. Gryffindor. The Gryffindor table erupted. He heard other tables clapping too. The hat's long deliberation had clearly been noted, and there was a particular quality of attention in the room now, the kind that meant people were paying a different kind of notice. He walked to the Gryffindor table and slid into a seat, and the boy with the scar on his forehead was 3 seats down and staring at him with green eyes that were doing that thing eyes did when a person was trying not to look like they were staring. Naruto met the stare and grinned. Harry Potter blinked. Hey, Naruto said. Hey, Harry said after a moment, I'm Naruto. Harry, a pause. The hat took ages with you. Yeah, we had a conversation. Harry's brow furrowed slightly. The hat usually just talks at you. We went back and forth a bit. Naruto helped himself to something that appeared to be chicken because the food had appeared at the tables the moment the sorting ended and he hadn't eaten properly since yesterday. It said something interesting about you. Harry went very still in the way people went still when they were pretending to be casual. Did it? Said you've been carrying your loneliness so long you forgot what it felt like. Naruto took a bite, watching Harry's face. That sound right. The stillness became something more complicated. Harry opened his mouth, closed it, looked down at his plate. The hat said that about me, to you. More like it pointed you out, Naruto shrugged. Hats don't have to ask permission. That's a bit invasive actually. Sure, another bite, still true though. Harry looked at him for a long moment with those careful green eyes, and Naruto waited because he'd learned that some people needed a moment before they could decide to be honest with a stranger, and that was okay, and the waiting was part of it. Yeah, Harry said finally. Probably, yeah, Naruto nodded. Me too, for a while, he said. Gets better. He said it simply without performance, because it was true and complicated truths sometimes needed to be simple first, and Harry Potter looked at him with an expression that was halfway between skepticism and something that might, if you were patient, eventually become hope. Down the table, Naruto saw Ron Weasley watching this exchange with the expression of someone witnessing something they didn't have the vocabulary for yet. He grinned at Ron too. Ron's ears went red. The feast continued. The ceiling showed lightning over the lake. The candles floated and the portraits shifted on their frames, and the first years looked around with wide eyes at a world they'd just stepped into. And Naruto ate 2 servings of everything, and one of the older Gryffindor students asked him where he was from, and he said Hidden Leaf Village, and explained what that meant for about 15 minutes and gathered a crowd of 6 without trying. He caught Tsunade's eye across the hall. She was at the staff table, seated between Dumbledore and a short, squat witch in pink robes who had a smile that reminded Naruto of a ceramic doll, fixed and faintly wrong, like the muscles around it were serving a function other than genuine happiness. Tsunade's expression, directed at this woman, was the precise professional neutral she used when she was deciding something. He'd seen that face before. He'd seen it right before she decided things that changed situations fundamentally. The pink witch caught him looking and smiled at him, and the smile was warm and entirely cold underneath, and he felt Kurama shift in him the way the fox shifted when they walked into a room that smelled like something they didn't trust. Her, Kurama said. Yeah, Naruto thought he'd learn her name soon enough. For now, he filed the face, the smile, the quality of the eyes behind it, and turned back to his food and the boy with the scar on his forehead who was quietly, carefully, pretending not to listen to every word Naruto said. The feast ended. The students moved toward their dormitories in chattering, overlapping streams. Naruto walked with the sixth-year Gryffindors through the moving staircases, one of which shifted under the mid-climb, and he stepped off its edge onto the banister and balanced there without breaking stride, which caused Seamus Finnegan to make a sound like a deflating balloon, and arrived at the portrait of the fat lady, who looked at the headband on his forehead with absolute fascination. "Password," she said, but somewhat absently, still staring. "Abstinence," said Hermione Granger, who had appeared at Naruto's elbow from the direction of the Ravenclaw Tower, which should not have been possible geographically, and then he realized she'd followed him. Deliberately. She looked slightly embarrassed about this and completely unrepentant. "You're in Ravenclaw," he said. "I know where I am," she said. I had questions about your chakra system. I read about it in Comprehensive Magical Taxonomies last year and it described something similar, but I think the book was wrong in at least 3 significant ways and I wanted to." "Tomorrow," he said not unkindly. "Get some sleep first. Your brain's going 1,000 miles an hour and it'll work better in the morning." She blinked. "How did you, your hands," he said. "You've been holding your book bag strap like you're going to pull a scroll out of it any second." That's someone whose head is already 10 steps ahead of the conversation. He grinned. "Tomorrow, bring the book, I'll tell you what it got wrong." She looked at him for a moment with an expression he recognized. It was the same one Sakura had gotten that time he'd correctly identified the source of a medical problem before she had. Offended, impressed, recalibrating. "Fine," she said, "tomorrow." She turned and walked back down the corridor with the purposeful stride of someone who had a destination and a list. He went through the portrait hole and found the Gryffindor common room warm and loud and red. Firelight everywhere, students spreading out on sofas and chairs and the floor in the comfortable sprawl of people returning to a known space. He found a chair by the window, the one with the view of the lake, and sat in it and looked out at the black water below. "Kurama," he thought. "Still here," the fox said. "The seal under the castle. How deep?" A long pause. "Very. Older than the school, I think." "Whoever laid it, they knew what they were doing, or thought they did." A pause. Our arrival woke something in it, a resonance. Like ringing a bell next to another bell that hasn't been struck in centuries. And the second bell is going to sound eventually. "It already started," Kurama said. "You just can't hear it yet." Naruto looked at the lake. The water was very still despite the storm, which was strange if you thought about it, and he thought about it, and he decided to find out why in the morning. From the sofa nearby, Harry Potter pretended to read and didn't. From the chair across the fire, Ron Weasley honestly tried to sleep and couldn't because his brain kept replaying a blonde stranger stepping off a moving staircase onto a banister and walking along it like it was a perfectly reasonable footpath. From somewhere in the West Tower, Tsunade sat at her desk with a medical text in one hand and a cup of sake she'd produced from somewhere in her Haori in the other. And she looked at the castle around her, the stone, the history, the weight of it, and thought about institutions that were built to protect children and asked too much of them anyway. And she thought about a village she'd left and come back to and left again. And she thought about being 2 months from home and entirely herself anyway. Which was more than she'd been able to say for years. The fire crackled, the portrait slept, the castle settled into its ancient rhythms. And somewhere beneath it all, in the dark beneath the stones, something that had been sleeping for 400 years turned over like a dreamer approaching waking, drawn by a sound it recognized. A frequency it had been built to answer, humming now in the bones of the building like a question that had finally found its way home. Chapter 2. Underneath, the quiet Madame Pomfrey had been running the Hogwarts hospital wing for 31 years. In that time she had dealt with bones vanished by incompetent Quidditch accidents, students transfigured into partial furniture, at least one case of spontaneous feather growth she still hadn't fully documented, and a boy who'd arrived at the start of his 2nd year with memory loss, a broken arm, and what she could only describe as a cloud of bad decisions following him everywhere he went. She considered herself unshockable. She had built her professional identity around being unshockable. Tsunade walked into the hospital wing at 7 in the morning, picked up a vial of Skeel Grow from the potions cabinet, held it to the light and said, "This is your bone regeneration compound." "Yes," Pomfrey said, "and the recovery time for a full limb is a night, sometimes 2 depending on the severity." Tsunade set the vial down with a precision that suggested she had opinions. "I can do it in 4 hours. Pomfrey stared at her. "That's not possible." "I know," Tsunade said, already moving to the next cabinet. "It's also what I just said." She opened the cabinet, surveyed the contents with the systematic focus of someone reading a battlefield. Your wound closure methodology, what are you using for deep tissue? Episci for surface, vulnera sainenter for the more serious. Do you use direct energy application? Hands-on, Pomfrey blinked. We channel healing magic through, show me. Tsunade pulled a stool up to the cabinet and sat on it. From the beginning, show me what you do and how you do it. She looked at Pomfrey directly and her amber eyes had the particular quality of complete attention, not aggressive, not dismissive, just entirely uncomfortably present. I'm not here to tell you you're doing it wrong. I want to understand the system before I start having opinions about it. That's very measured, Pomfrey said, slightly off balance. I've had 30 years of practice at not leading with my opinions, Tsunade said. It took about 25 of them. Pomfrey sat down across from her and something settled between them, a mutual recognition, the particular frequency that ran between two people who had both spent their lives being the one who fixed things after everyone else had broken them. It didn't make them friends immediately, but it made them something. All right, Pomfrey said, from the beginning. The morning passed that way, systematic, productive, occasionally contentious, in the way of two experts who had both been the most qualified person in the room for so long that disagreement felt almost like relief. By 9 o'clock, Tsunade had reorganized 2 shelves of potions inventory into a more logical treatment sequence. Written notes on 6 areas where she thought the Hogwarts methodology could be supplemented with chakra-based approaches, and also casually mentioned that she'd regenerated a destroyed liver once, which caused Pomfrey to set down her quill and stare at the wall for approximately 30 seconds before she collected herself and wrote it down. Tsunade let her stare. She was used to the staring. She'd long since made her peace with being extraordinary and the way extraordinary made other people feel. What she hadn't made her peace with, and she was aware of this in the way you were aware of a splinter you'd decided to deal with later, was the feeling that had been sitting in her chest since she'd walked through this school yesterday. Something about the stone corridors and the portrait-hung walls and the young voices filling the space was making the armor she wore sit differently. Heavier. She'd built that armor out of grief and she knew it, and she'd been fine with it for years because armor was useful and grief was honest and she'd had work to do. But there was something about a school, specifically this school, that made the armor feel less like protection and more like weight. She filed it. Later, Naruto's first morning as a non-student student of Hogwarts went, depending on your perspective, extremely well or entirely off the rails. He sat in on defense against the dark arts because the name interested him. He arrived 2 minutes late because a portrait of a medieval knight on the 3rd floor had challenged him to a theoretical discussion of offensive strategy, and he'd been unable to resist, and he slid into a seat at the back of the classroom precisely as Dolores Umbridge settled herself at the front of it with the unhurried deliberateness of someone who considered every room her room and every moment her moment. She was wearing pink. Head to toe, cardigan, skirt, little bow at her collar, the specific pink of something that was trying very hard to seem soft. She looked at the class with that ceramic doll smile, and then her eyes found Naruto at the back and the smile stayed exactly the same width and the eyes above it sharpened like something being focused. We have a visitor, she said, sweet, light, the way a closing door sounds light. Naruto, he said, Uzumaki, I'm sitting in if that's all right. Of course, she said. We welcome all students to learning. She turned back to the class and the warmth of her voice was like syrup, thick enough to coat things. Now, as I was saying in our first lesson yesterday, practical application of defensive spells is not something we'll be exploring this year. He watched the room. 6th years, Harry and his friends, a spread of students who all had opinions they weren't fully expressing. He could see it in the way they held themselves. Harry's jaw was set. A girl with wild red hair, Ginny Weasley, he remembered from the introductions last night, had her quill pressed flat against her parchment like she was considering stabbing something. Ron was doing the careful non-expression of someone performing neutrality. You'll be studying the theory of defensive, Umbridge was saying. Sorry, Naruto said. She turned, the smile stayed. Yes, why no practical? The room went very still in the particular way rooms went still when someone had said the thing everyone was thinking and was waiting to find out if it was going to cost them. Because, Umbridge said with the patience of someone explaining something to a child, theoretical understanding forms the foundation of, knowing how a punch works doesn't mean you can fight, Naruto said. Not argumentatively, he was genuinely curious. He was leaning forward with his elbows on the desk, his tone conversational. If someone attacks you in the dark, you don't have time to remember theory. You need to have done the thing until your body knows it without your brain. He looked at her. That's basic. Every combat teacher I've ever had started there. Combat teacher, Umbridge repeated, and something moved behind her eyes. How interesting. And where exactly did you study, Mr. Uzumaki? Hidden Leaf Village, trained under Jirya of the Sannin. He could see she had no idea who that was. Also under Kakashi Haddock, he was ANBU. That's, he translated in his head, roughly equivalent to your Aurors, except he started at 12. He watched her face. The woman I travel with trained under the same person, Tsunade. She's the Fifth Hokage, which means she runs our village. She started field missions at 9. How barbaric, Umbridge said sweetly. The sweetness was the tell. He'd met enough people who dressed cruelty in soft fabric to recognize the pattern. You think training children is barbaric, he said, but not sending them to a school where they can't learn to defend themselves while there's a war on. The silence changed quality. Harry was now staring at him with an expression of concentrated attention. There is no war, Umbridge said, and her voice had dropped one register, not threatening, not yet, but the space before threatening. Hogwarts is a safe institution of, someone came back last year, Naruto said, still conversational. Voldemort, right? Half the room flinched. Harry didn't. Umbridge's smile disappeared for exactly half a second and then reappeared. That is Ministry classified. He did, Harry said from across the room. Umbridge turned to him. He came back, Harry said with the clear, flat certainty of someone who had been there. I watched it happen. I watched someone die because of it. He met Umbridge's gaze without blinking. I've been saying that since June. Mr. Potter, he's right, Naruto said, not loudly, just clearly. And you know he's right, and everyone in this room probably knows he's right. He leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed. So the question is, if there's a war coming and you know it's coming, why are you teaching kids theory instead of how to survive it? The classroom breathed. Umbridge looked at him with those focused, cold eyes, and he looked back, and the thing about Naruto Uzumaki was that he didn't do intimidation. He'd faced the nine-tailed fox and chosen to make it his partner. He'd stared down Cage and gods in human form and men who thought power was the right to hurt people. Dolar's Umbridge in her pink cardigan was, in the scale of things he'd looked at without blinking, about a 3. Perhaps, she said with a smile that had found a new quality, not warm now but sharp underneath the soft. You'd like to demonstrate your own methods, Mr. Uzumaki, he said. Sure, she blinked. She'd expected pushback. He stood up, walked to the front of the classroom, and turned to face 30 students who were looking at him with a range of expressions from terrified to delighted. He glanced at Umbridge, who had moved to the side of the room with the look of someone planning something, and then he looked at the class. Stand up, he said. Everyone. Chairs scraped. They stood. You don't need your wands for this. Put them away. Some of them looked uncertain. I promise you won't need them. He waited until the wands were down. Now the first thing your body needs to learn about a dangerous situation is how to not freeze. That's it. That's the whole first lesson. Your instincts are going to tell you to stop and figure out what's happening. That instinct will get you killed. He moved his hands. So we're going to practice not freezing. When I move, he blurred sideways at about a quarter of his actual speed, just enough to be startling, don't think. Just move. He spent the next 15 minutes running them through something he'd distilled from years of his own genin training, simple movement drills. Nothing that required magic or chakra, just the physical retraining of the freeze response. He was watching them, adjusting, catching things. Neville Longbottom froze every time on the first beat and then overcorrected. He slowed his approach for Neville, made it more telegraphed, waited until Neville moved first before pushing. Lavender Brown had good instincts but closed her eyes. Harry moved before he thought, which meant his body knew things his head hadn't caught up to yet. Umbridge watched from the side of the room, very still, the smile entirely gone. When he stopped, the class was breathing harder and also, almost universally, looking at him differently. Not with awe exactly, something more useful than awe. The specific look of people who had just discovered that their body was capable of something they'd been told required magic. Theory is useful, he said, but it lives in your head. Your body needs its own education. He looked at the class. Work with what your teachers give you. The theory matters, but practice, even if it's just this. Practice not freezing. He went back to his seat. Umbridge looked at him for a long moment and then resumed the lesson. And her voice for the rest of the class had a particular quality, controlled, deliberate, just barely on the correct side of normal, that told him everything he needed to know about how much she had not enjoyed the last 15 minutes. After class in the corridor, Harry caught up with him. You're going to be in trouble, Harry said. Probably, Naruto said agreeably. She reports to the ministry. She's not just a teacher, she's here to watch the school. Dumbledore. He stopped, clearly editing himself. She and Dumbledore don't get along. She's been looking for reasons to, Harry. Naruto stopped walking. She is looking for reasons, I know that, but here's the thing, he turned to face him fully. I'm not afraid of her, not because I'm reckless, because she doesn't have anything I need. She can't take away my rank, my village, my people. They're not here for her to use against me. That's the only kind of person you can actually argue with, one who has nothing to lose to the people doing the threatening. He looked at Harry with something direct and simple. You don't have that. So when I do this stuff in class, you don't have to follow. I'm not trying to drag you into something. Harry was quiet for a moment. She said you'd be a bad influence on students. What do you think? A pause. Very carefully, Harry said, I think that was the most useful defense lesson I've had in a year. Ron appeared from behind a tapestry, had he been there the whole time, and said, also Neville actually moved, which is basically unprecedented. Neville, appearing from the same tapestry with the expression of a man who'd been lurking and knew it, said, I moved twice. You moved twice, Ron confirmed, with the generosity of someone issuing a compliment they genuinely meant. Naruto grinned at all three of them. Same time tomorrow, then. The ancient seal made itself known for the first time at 2 in the afternoon in the middle of Transfiguration. Naruto wasn't there. He was in the library in a corner, attempting to read an 800-year-old text on runic magic that Hermione had found for him, while Hermione sat across the table and interrogated him about the chakra system with the focus of a person who had found a research topic that was actively eating her brain. He'd been explaining the Biju chakra suppression seal, the mechanism, not the experience, when Kurama went very still. Stop talking, the fox said. He stopped mid-sentence. What? Hermione said. SHH. He put his hand flat on the table and felt it, the faintest vibration, not in the stone but through the stone, like the building was transmitting something that had no source in the room. It lasted about 4 seconds and then went quiet. What was that? Hermione said, differently now. You felt it. There was a resonance, she said, precise as always. Like a high-frequency ward being tripped, but the usual wards don't feel like. She stopped. That wasn't a Hogwarts ward. No, he said, it wasn't. He stood, putting his hand against the wall, feeling the stone. Under it, deep, deep under it, there was a hum, faint enough that he'd have missed it yesterday. Louder than nothing. Kurama. Something reacted to the transfiguration magic, the fox said, and he sounded focused, which was unusual enough to pay attention to. A specific frequency. Old chakra, very old, and it resonated with the magic from upstairs like sympathetic vibration. It's getting more active, yes, Kurama said, and before you ask, no, I don't know what it's building toward yet. I need more data. How do I get you more data? Go lower, the fox said simply. Find where the resonance is strongest. He filed it, pulled his hand from the wall, and sat back down. Hermione was watching him with the particular look she used when she'd observed something and was deciding whether to report it or investigate it herself. He'd noticed she almost always chose investigation. There's something under the school, he said. Old ceiling array, chakra-based. I need to find out where it's strongest. The dungeons go very deep, she said immediately. Past the Slytherin common room, past the potions classroom. There are passages that haven't been mapped. I found references to them in Hogwarts, a history but no actual floor plans. She paused. I can get you a map. You have a map of Hogwarts? I have a copy of a map, she said. Harry has the better one, but it's complicated. I'll explain later. She was already pulling parchment out of her bag. The lowest point that's been formally documented is roughly 14 meters below the lake bed. But there are references to levels below that in the Founder's original construction notes, which aren't publicly available but the restricted section has a transcription of. She caught his expression. I've read the restricted section extensively. Why am I not surprised? He said. Because you've been reading me for approximately 16 hours, she said, with a dry precision that reminded him of Shikamaru, which was deeply funny given the energy difference between the two of them. By the time afternoon classes ended, he made a plan for the evening and also learned more about runic magic in 4 hours than he'd expected to learn in a week. Because Hermione Granger in full explanatory mode was essentially a high-speed lecture with footnotes, and she'd given him 3 things about the relationship between runic carving and chakra flow theory that were genuinely, honestly new information. He told Tsunade about the seal resonance at dinner. She listened with her chopsticks. She'd found chopsticks somewhere, and the kitchen staff, delighted, had made her a bowl of something approximating miso soup that was slightly wrong but good faith wrong, held steady and her expression neutral. When he finished, she set the chopsticks down. How deep? She said. Don't know yet. Kurama thinks lower than the mapped sections. I'll come with you. You don't have to. I know I don't have to, she said, with the infinite patience of someone who had told this particular person to stop being noble approximately 700 times. I'm telling you I will. Different thing. She picked up her chopsticks again. When? Tonight, midnight. Obviously midnight, she said. It's always midnight. Down the table, Dumbledore was looking at them. Not obviously, he was deep in a conversation with the charms professor, a tiny cheerful man named Flitwick who had apparently been an expert duelist in his youth and had the warm, bustling energy of someone who had made peace with the world. But between sentences, Dumbledore's gaze came back to Naruto, and there was something in it, not surveillance, not suspicion, but the careful attention of someone who knew more than they'd said and was deciding when to say the rest of it. Naruto made a note to ask him directly. He always preferred direct. The Gryffindor common room in the evening was a specific kind of comfortable. The fire burned down to orange. The chess pieces on the table in the corner moved through abandoned games. Older students read or talked in voices that had settled into the relaxed register of people who knew where they were. Naruto sat on the hearthrug with his legs crossed, which was simply where he sat when he was thinking, and he was looking at the notes Hermione had passed him through the portrait hole with a message that said, "I shouldn't technically be in Gryffindor Tower after curfew, so please don't mention this. Here are the relevant restricted section pages I've summarized from memory, because I wasn't allowed to remove them." Harry sat beside him and didn't pretend to read this time. "The seal under the castle," Harry said quietly. "Is it dangerous?" Naruto looked at him. "You heard me tell Tsunade. You weren't being quiet." "Fair, I don't know yet," he said honestly. Something old that's been dormant isn't inherently dangerous just from waking up. But something old that was built with a specific purpose and then left unfinished, that depends on what the purpose was. He looked at the notes. Whoever laid the seal was working with both chakra and runic magic. That combination, as far as I know, nobody's done that successfully. It requires two fundamentally different energy systems to cooperate, and they don't naturally. It's like he thought about it, trying to run two rivers through the same channel. They both go somewhere, but the place they meet is always turbulent. What would happen if it fully activated? "I don't know," Naruto said, which was the honest answer. "It might just open a door to somewhere, or it might tear a hole in something that matters." He looked at Harry. "I'm going to find it tonight." Harry was quiet for a moment. "I want to come." "You don't have to." "I want to," Harry said with a simple directness that Naruto recognized. The thing underneath it was, "I need to be doing something, not waiting." He knew that feeling like his own heartbeat. "Okay," he said. "But if we find something that's above either of our pay grades, we back up and get Tsunade." Harry nodded. "Deal. And you're going to tell me about the map." Harry made a face. "It's the Marauder's map. It shows everyone's location in the castle in real time. I've had it since third year." "Where did you get it?" "Fred and George Weasley stole it from Filch." Naruto absorbed this. "Who's Filch?" "The caretaker. He hates students." "The map was originally made by 4 people, Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. Those are fake names." "Obviously," Harry said with a shade of something complicated, not sadness exactly, more like the specific weight of knowing a story that didn't have a clean ending. "2 of them were my dad and his best friend. The other 2, he stopped. "It's complicated." Naruto didn't push, he filed it. He'd ask later when Harry had decided to tell it, because Harry Potter was someone who needed to decide to give you something rather than have it asked from him. And that was fine, that was okay. Naruto had all the patience in the world for people who needed to arrive at trust on their own schedule. The map, produced from a hidden pocket in Harry's robes, was genuinely remarkable. It showed the entire castle in fine ink lines, and the names of everyone in it moved as they moved, a living document of hundreds of footsteps and presences and currently sleeping portraits. Naruto looked at the levels below the dungeons. "Here," he said, pointing at an area below and to the left of the Slytherin common room. There was a faint line, not quite a passage, not quite a wall, that suggested something. "The map shows this." "Barely," Harry said, leaning over. "I've looked at the map for years and never noticed that." "Wait," his finger traced the line. "It's not in the regular ink. It was silver, very faint, like it had been drawn on top of the original map but in a different hand." "Someone added to the map," Naruto said. "Or the map updated itself," Harry said. The castle does things like that sometimes. The staircases move, the rooms change." "Dumbledore says Hogwarts is partly alive." "Partly alive," Kurama said from somewhere inside him with a note that was almost satisfaction. "That explains the resonance. The building is responding to us. We're not waking the seal. The seal is waking the building, and the building is a pause, trying to communicate something." Naruto sat with that for a moment. Then he said to Harry, "The castle's trying to tell us where to go." Harry stared at the map. "That's," Naruto said, "really unsettling." "A little bit." They went at midnight. Tsunade materialized in the corridor outside the common room portrait hole with the silent precision of someone for whom nighttime movement was simply a professional skill. She'd changed into darker clothes and her hair was down, which made her look, if possible, even more formidable. She looked at Harry, assessed him in about 2 seconds and said, "You've done something like this before." Harry said, "Yeah." "Good," she said and led. She led because she was Tsunade and leading was how she moved through the world. Naruto fell into step behind her right shoulder where he'd walked 1,000 times, and Harry fell in beside him with the adaptable awareness of someone who was used to following people who knew what they were doing. They went down. The dungeons were cold and smelled like damp stone and old potions, and the particular mustiness of spaces that only students inhabited seasonally. The torches down here burned lower than upstairs, green-tinged, flickering, casting everything in a slightly wrong light that made the shadows uncertain. They passed the entrance to the Slytherin common room, went further, found the passage Hermione's notes had described. It was narrow and it went down at a steep angle, and the map in Harry's hand showed that the silver line was ahead of them, below them, getting brighter as they descended. The passage opened out into a chamber that wasn't on any map at all. It was large. Large enough that the far wall wasn't clearly visible, just suggested stone disappearing into darkness. The floor was covered in carvings, not decorative, not architectural, but dense, layered, the kind of carving that took years and intention and a specific knowledge of how to make the earth itself remember something. Naruto crouched at the edge of the carved floor and held a hand out over it. The heat hit him immediately. Not physical heat, chakra heat, old and enormous, the residue of something that had been active once and still held the memory of its own purpose. He could feel the resonance now without trying. It moved through the floor in waves, faint enough to be below perception for anyone without chakra sensitivity, loud as a bell to him and Kurama both. Tsunade crouched beside him. "Sealing array," she said, studying the carvings. But she traced a line without touching it, these intersections. The logic isn't Uzumaki style, it's something else. "Older," Naruto said. She looked at him. Much older. She straightened, standing above the carving, and turned slowly, taking in the full scope of the chamber. "Someone spent decades on this." She paused. "Centuries, maybe." Harry held the map out. The silver line ran from the edges of the map school directly here, and at the center of the chamber's floor where the densest concentration of carvings converged, the silver on the map was bright enough to see clearly in the low light. "The map is showing this as a destination," Harry said. "Like it's where we were supposed to come." In the center of the chamber's floor, something changed. It was subtle, just a brightening, a deepening of the light coming from the carved lines, like someone had turned a lamp up a fraction. But the resonance increased with it, and Naruto felt Kurama react, the fox's presence in him becoming more alert and large. "It knows we're here," Kurama said. "Is that a problem?" "That depends on what it wants," the fox said, and then quietly, "I think it wants the same thing we do." "What does it want?" Harry said, and Naruto startled slightly. He hadn't meant to say that out loud. "To finish something," Tsunade said before he could answer. She was still looking at the carvings, and her voice had the particular quality of someone working a diagnosis. "This seal was never completed. You can see it here." She pointed at a section of carving where the lines simply stopped, midway through what should have been a closed circuit if someone ran out of time. "The seal has been sitting here, incomplete, with enough energy to maintain itself but not enough to do whatever it was built to do. And our arrival," Naruto started. "Woke it up," she said. "Yes," she looked at him, "because you carry the thing it was designed to work with." They looked at each other, and between them passed the shorthand of people who had been through too much together to need all the words. "This is old and powerful and incomplete and somehow knows about Kurama, and we don't have enough information yet, and we need more before we do anything, and also we're not leaving this room afraid of it." "We should tell Dumbledore," Harry said. "Tomorrow," Tsunade said. "Tonight we map it." She looked at Harry. "Can that thing," she nodded at the Marauder's map, "capture what's down here?" Harry looked at the map. The silver lines had spread, detailing the chamber in new ink as they stood in it. "It's yes," he said, sounding faintly amazed. "It's already doing it." "Good," she said. "Then we start from the edges and work in." "Naruto, don't touch anything." She looked at him. I know you won't. I'm saying it anyway." "I wasn't going to touch anything," he said. "I could see you thinking about it." "I was thinking about it," he admitted, "but I wasn't going to do it." Harry, who had been very tense since they'd entered the chamber, made a sound that might have been a laugh attempting to happen in the wrong circumstances. He converted it quickly into a cough. But Naruto caught it and filed it away. Another small thing, Harry Potter discovering that his body wanted to laugh even in the places that scared him, which was one of the most useful things a person could find out about themselves. They spent an hour in the chamber. They mapped it as much as they could, Tsunade taking the systematic methodical approach, Naruto reading the resonance points and relaying what he felt to her, Harry's map capturing it all in that expanding silver line. The seal was large, much larger than it appeared. The visible carvings were only the top layer. The deeper they looked, the more complex the underlying structure became, and by the end of the hour they'd identified at least 7 distinct sealing layers, each one older than the last. Whoever started this, Tsunade said as they finally climbed back out of the passage, was a genius. Naruto said, they're 400 years dead. Naruto. Right, he thought about it. A genius and a failure. She looked at him sideways. A genius who ran out of time, she said, with the particular precision of someone correcting something that mattered, not the same thing. They came out of the dungeons into the dim corridor above, and the cold of the deep stone clung to them still, and the castle breathed around them in its ancient rhythms. And Naruto could feel now that he was looking for it, now that Kurama had named it, the building's attention. Not hostile, not quite welcoming. Something in between, like a door that was opening very slowly, waiting to see who was on the other side before it decided whether to open the rest of the way. He thought about that on the walk back up. He thought about Tsunade, saying not the same thing with such precision. He thought about Harry walking beside him, comfortable now in the darkness in a way he hadn't been at the start of the evening, because things that scared Harry Potter didn't make him small, they made him move, and that was something Naruto recognized like a reflection. At the portrait hole Harry stopped. Tomorrow, he said, we talked to Dumbledore. Tomorrow, Naruto confirmed. Harry nodded, hesitated. Naruto. He said the name carefully, like he was getting used to the shape of it. What Umbridge said in class today about your training being barbaric, you didn't react to it. I know, why not? Naruto looked at him for a moment, taking stock of the question, what it was really asking, which was not about Umbridge at all. Because she said it to make me feel small, he said, and I don't. He met Harry's eyes. Not anymore. I did when I was younger, believe me I did, but I stopped letting other people define the scale I measure myself by. He tilted his head. She can't hurt me with that, she'd have to find something real. Harry was quiet for a moment. Is that something you decided or something that just happened? Both, Naruto said. You decide and then it happens and then you decide again about 1,000 times, that's how it works. Harry turned that over. Every time, gets easier, Naruto said. Each time it's less of a decision and more of just who you are, he grinned. But yeah, every time. The portrait hole opened and Harry went through, and Naruto stood in the corridor alone for a moment before following, the castle humming just below, hearing the seal somewhere beneath him turning in its long, incomplete rest, and Kurama warm and present and thinking, the way the fox thought when he decided something was real enough to care about. What are you working on? Naruto asked. The 7th layer, Kurama said, the deepest one. There's a signature on it, like a chakra fingerprint. Whoever left it wasn't someone I've encountered before, but he paused. But the chakra has a quality I recognize, similar to your sealing clan, Uzumaki adjacent, a bloodline cousin maybe. Someone related to my clan made this seal, someone who learned from the same source. The fox said, maybe I need to look more carefully. A pause. But Naruto, whatever this seal was supposed to do and whoever built it, it wasn't built to harm. The intent in the construction is it's protective. It's trying to protect something, or someone. Naruto looked at the stone floor, thinking about what was below it. Who, he thought. Kurama didn't answer. But the seal, 5 floors below, pulsed once, quiet, warm, and waiting, and the castle carried it upward through the bones of itself like a heartbeat. Chapter 3, Fox Fire. The Quidditch announcement went up on a Thursday. Naruto had been at Hogwarts for 6 days by that point, which was long enough to have developed opinions about the food excellent, especially the treacle tart. The staircases unreliable but oddly endearing, like a castle that had been raised without discipline, and Peeves the poltergeist, respect. Honestly, the commitment to chaos was something he could get behind. He'd also developed opinions about Quidditch, which was that watching 200 pounds of enchanted wood and metal being ridden at speed by 16-year-olds in bad weather was either the most reckless or the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen, and the answer was probably both at once. The announcement said tryouts for the Gryffindor team were Saturday morning. He didn't sign up. He stood in front of the notice board in the common room with Ron pointing at it enthusiastically, and Harry looking at it with the specific expression of someone who loved something and was preparing to be denied it. Umbridge had banned Harry from the team last year, a fact that had been delivered to Naruto in pieces over several evenings by various people, each installment more infuriating than the last, and he felt the obvious thing, which was that Harry should be on that pitch. You're not trying out, Harry said, watching him study the board. I don't know how to fly a broom, Naruto said. Ron stared. You've never flown. I can walk on water, I can run up vertical surfaces. I've jumped between treetops at about 60 kilometers an hour. He looked at the notice board. Brooms are just a different version, but I'd need practice before a tryout, and practice takes time, and I have things to do with my Saturday. Like what? Going to see Dumbledore about the chamber. They'd told Dumbledore about the underground chamber the morning after they'd found it, over a breakfast meeting in his office that had lasted 2 hours and produced more questions than answers. Dumbledore had listened with complete attention, asked precise questions, and when they'd finished, had been quiet for long enough that even Naruto had started to wonder if they'd broken him. I was aware of it, he'd finally said. In a general sense, I knew there was something very old beneath the castle. I could feel it the way one feels weather before it arrives, but I hadn't found it. He looked at the map Harry was holding, at the new silver lines spreading through the lower dungeons. And I hadn't known it was chakra-based. What did you think it was? Tsunade had asked. Ancient runic, Dumbledore had said. Something pre-Hogwarts, perhaps one of the founders. He'd paused. But chakra and runic magic merging, that's not something our histories have recorded. He'd looked at them with those bright, considering eyes that we know of. So now, Saturday, Naruto was going back down with Tsunade while Dumbledore joined them for the first time, and Harry and Ron went to Quidditch tryouts, and Hermione had asked to come with them to the chamber so decisively that nobody had thought to argue. She walked with him through the upper corridors while Tsunade and Dumbledore went slightly ahead, already deep in a conversation about dimensional rift signatures that had begun in the entrance hall, and was generating the particular energy of two very intelligent people who had discovered a shared interest they hadn't known the other had. Hermione was taking notes on it as she walked. She could take notes on a moving staircase without losing a word, which Naruto had identified as possibly her most impressive skill, and she told him that was a terrible thing to say to someone who'd achieved 12 OWLS. You've read everything available about this school, Naruto said to her as they went down. And nothing about chakra-based magic under it. Nothing explicit, she said. But there are references in the founders' histories to a visiting scholar pre-founding before the castle was built, someone who consulted on the site selection and the foundational wards. She flipped back 3 pages in her notes without looking. The records call him the Navigator. No other name. He came from the East, worked with Helga Hufflepuff specifically, and left before the school opened. She looked up. The reference says he was, and I'm quoting, a man of unusual energy who marked the earth so that the school might remember its purpose. Marked the earth, Naruto said. The seal, she said. Yeah, he thought about what Kurama had said, protective, trying to protect something. What was Hufflepuff known for? Loyalty, fair play, hard work. Hermione paused. But also, her house is said to be the hardest to access and the most protected, and she was described by contemporaries as someone who valued safety above everything else. She looked at him. If someone was going to help lay a protective seal under a school, she'd be the one who'd want it. And our arrival woke it up, Naruto said. Your arrival specifically, she said carefully, because of the Kyuubi seal. He glanced at her. You figured that out yourself? The Kyuubi is a sealed entity of enormous chakra. If the chamber was built to respond to chakra of a specific type or magnitude, she was talking faster now, the way she did when she was closing in on something, then it wouldn't just be any chakra that triggered it. It would be a particular resonance. Biju chakra, sealed and contained, would create a signature unlike anything else in the world. She stopped walking. Naruto, what if the seal was built specifically to respond to a Jinchuriki? He looked at her. What if the Navigator knew one was coming? He thought about that all the way down to the chamber. The chamber looked different with more people in it. Not smaller, if anything. The walls seemed to retreat further as Dumbledore entered, the carved floor brightening in increments as though responding to the weight of his presence or simply the accumulated force of everyone standing in it. Dumbledore walked slowly around the edge of the carvings without stepping on them, his hands behind his back, his expression doing the thing it did when he was genuinely, deeply moved by something and not performing it. Extraordinary, he said very quietly. The 7th layer, Tsunade said, pointing. She'd been back twice since the first night, alone, working out the architecture of the thing with the methodical patience she applied to everything she respected. You need to get to the center of the array to see it clearly, but don't touch the lines, Naruto said. Yeah, I know you've said it, I'm saying it to Dumbledore. Oh, he looked at Dumbledore, don't touch the lines. Noted, Dumbledore said with an entirely straight face. They moved carefully around the perimeter while Hermione sketched the array from 3 different angles, and Tsunade walked Dumbledore through the ceiling architecture in the precise no-nonsense manner she used when she'd already decided someone was worth explaining things to. Naruto stood at the center not touching anything. He wasn't going to touch anything. He was just standing and felt the resonance with his full attention for the first time. It was different here, warmer. The waves he'd felt from upstairs were here a steady, low hum like a note being held at the edge of human hearing. But underneath the hum was something else, something more rhythmic, more intentional, like the pattern wasn't random but structured. Like a message. Kurama, he said, does that sound like anything to you? The fox was quiet for a long moment. Naruto could feel him listening not with ears but with the full apparatus of his ancient senses, 9 tails spread wide, reading the frequency with everything he had. It's a welcoming pattern, Kurama said finally, in a voice stripped of its usual commentary. Very old sealing clans used them. A dormant seal built with protective intent would establish a welcoming pattern for the entity it was designed to receive. So when that entity arrived, he paused. It would know it wasn't a threat. It's saying hello, Naruto said, in a language that's 800 years old, Kurama said, but yes, he looked up at the ceiling. It knows we're here, he said to the room. It's been knowing. The whole thing is designed to recognize Kurama's chakra as something it was expecting. Everyone looked at him. The navigator, Hermione said instantly. What about him? Dumbledore said. She explained her theory fast, precise, leaving nothing out. Dumbledore listened without interrupting, which Naruto had noticed he did for very few people, and it meant something. When she finished, the old wizard looked at the center of the chamber, at the convergence of all those ancient carved lines, and his expression had changed into something that was genuinely new, something approaching wonder, not the practiced, performed kind, but the real kind that happened when the world refused to stop being larger than you expected. A navigator who knew a Jinchuriki would come, he said slowly, and spent years building them a welcome. Not just a welcome, Tsunade said. A warning, she pointed at the outermost ring of the carving. These characters, I've been working on translating them. The script is archaic, but it derives from the same root as standard sealing notation. They're not decorative, they're instructions. She looked at Naruto. For the one who wakes it. He looked at her. What do they say? She was quiet for a moment with the particular quality of silence she used when she was deciding how to frame something difficult. Roughly, she said, it says, the door is open only once. The key is not the power but the choice. Choose what you protect, not the choice you make in crisis, the one you've already made, and the door will answer. The chamber was very still. That's not a warning, Naruto said. That's a test, or both, Hermione said, a warning that there is a test. And the test is, he looked at the center of the array at the point where every line converged, what I've chosen to protect. Already, not in the future, not hypothetically. What I have already decided, somewhere that can't be argued with. Can it tell? Harry's voice. He'd appeared in the passage entrance. Tryouts must have finished, Naruto thought, still in his Quidditch robes, hair destroyed by the wind. Ron was behind him. They'd clearly run, they'd clearly overheard the last part. A sealing array built from chakra can read intent, Naruto said, not thoughts, intent. It's in the quality of the chakra, what you've committed to in a way that's changed how your energy moves. He paused. It's like, you know how you can tell if someone means a threat just from their voice, it's that but for your whole energy system. And it can tell that from you, Harry said. It already has, Naruto said. That's why it's been welcoming us since we got here. It read me the night we arrived and decided we were all right. 800 years of waiting, Hermione said, almost to herself. And then you fall out of a dimensional rift in a Scottish field and it goes, oh, there you are. Naruto started laughing. He couldn't help it. It was funny, actually, in the way that his life was consistently, relentlessly funny if you had the right angle on it. The universe had been setting up this moment for 800 years and he'd arrived covered in mud complaining about the cold. Even Tsunade's mouth twitched. Even Dumbledore's eyes crinkled. The tryouts, Harry reported on the walk back up, had gone well, very well. He'd been reinstated on the team. McGonagall had apparently had a fairly pointed conversation with the relevant governing bodies and Umbridge's prohibition had been reversed on a technicality that McGonagall had clearly been holding in reserve specifically for this moment. He was back as Seeker. Ron was Keeper. There was a new beater named Coot who Harry said was terrifyingly aggressive about it. First match is in 3 weeks, Ron said, still glowing with the Keeper selection like a lamp with a new battery. Gryffindor versus Slytherin. Slytherin have Draco Malfoy, Harry said, and the way he said it contained a history. Naruto had been in classes with Draco Malfoy 4 times now. He'd arrived at each conclusion independently. Malfoy was clever, genuinely, not performatively, And that was worth noting because people who were clever but performed stupidity were usually doing it because the intelligence felt dangerous. He was precise with his wand work and never showed off in class, which contradicted the image of the arrogant pureblood perfectly and meant the arrogance was a surface. He said things that were designed to sting and he watched to see if they did, and when they didn't he recalibrated, and that was the behavior of someone who had learned to read rooms because the rooms he grew up in required it. He'd tried the standard arsenal on Naruto twice. The first time had been a comment about whisker marks that was supposed to land as mockery and instead prompted Naruto to explain Kyuubi seal markings for 10 minutes in a way that gathered 6 curious Ravenclaws. The second time was a pointed question about his village's structure, implying that a Hokage was a ridiculous title for someone without noble blood, and Naruto had looked at him with something that wasn't anger and said, "My village chose me," which had ended the exchange in a way Draco clearly hadn't predicted. He was, Naruto thought, a person who'd never once had someone refuse to play his game on his terms. And refusing the game, not aggressively, not with counter-mockery, just genuinely not engaging with the premise, was clearly a thing Draco didn't have a response for. It was almost touching, in a frustrating way. The Quidditch match arrived with the blunt inevitability of weather. 3 weeks, as it turned out, was just long enough for Naruto to understand the rules, develop opinions about all the Gryffindor players' techniques, and have a conversation with Oliver Wood, who had graduated but apparently still visited the school to give Harry tactical advice, which Harry absorbed with the patience of someone who loved the person giving it, about the differences between broomstick maneuvering and tree-to-tree jumps. Oliver had been deeply interested in that conversation and had come away with 2 ideas Naruto suspected would end up in a Quidditch textbook eventually. The Saturday of the match was cold and clear, the sky a washed-out blue above the pitch, the stands full and loud by 9 in the morning. Naruto sat with Hermione and Ron's sister Ginny, who had not made the team this year and was being very sportsmanlike about it in the way people were sportsmanlike when they were vibrating with frustrated energy and choosing not to let it become ugly. Ginny Weasley, Naruto had decided, was one of the most interesting people at Hogwarts. She'd been through something, he didn't know what yet, but he recognized the shape of it, the way someone carried an experience that had gotten close enough to change them. She had the contained quality of someone who decided a long time ago that they were going to be fine, and unlike Harry's version of that decision, hers had a heat to it, an active daily choosing of fine that expressed itself as directness and a dry humor and a willingness to call things exactly what they were. She was explaining the Wronski feint to him with the enthusiasm of someone who had spent 10 years studying something they genuinely loved, and he was listening with genuine interest. And they were in the middle of this when Draco Malfoy's voice came from 2 rows up. "Look at the creature supporting the wrong team," he said to the Slytherins around him. "Should have sorted into Hufflepuff, that's where all the charity cases end up." Naruto didn't turn around. "He's talking to you," Ginny said very quietly with her jaw set. "I know," Naruto said. "Is the Wronski feint a real dive or a fake?" She looked at him for a half-second. "Real dive, fake snitch, the seeker pulls up at the last. Does it work if the other seeker doesn't commit fully?" "Only if your seeker is good enough to make the setup convincing, which, charity cases," Draco said louder, addressing the general vicinity of his own house and pets. A specific emphasis on the word. "Some people let their creatures sit in the stands like they belong here." Naruto turned around this time. Not sharply, he simply turned, the way you turned when something finally required direct address. He looked at Draco Malfoy sitting there in his Slytherin green, his friends arranged around him in the configuration of an audience, and he looked at him calmly and with complete attention. Draco met the look. Naruto had noticed he always met the look. He didn't flinch, which was either courage or pride, and with Draco it was probably both. "The creature comment," Naruto said conversationally. "Is that about Kurama?" "I don't know what a Kurama is," Draco said. "Nine-tailed fox, sealed in me since birth." He watched Draco absorb that. "You want to call me a creature, at least be accurate about what you mean. You mean the fox is unclean or I'm less than you because I carry it?" "I mean," Draco said, still precise, still performed, "that whatever you are, you're not one of us." "I know," Naruto said. "I'm not trying to be." He turned back to the pitch. Over his shoulder he said, "But if you want to talk about what I actually am rather than what makes you comfortable, I'm here." Silence from above. Then Draco said at slightly reduced volume to whoever was beside him, "Absolutely bizarre." Naruto heard it and almost smiled. The match kicked off, 14 players on brooms launching into the cold air at a signal from Madame Hooch. the quaffle arcing red against the pale sky, and everything that wasn't Quidditch receded to background noise. He watched Harry go immediately vertical, climbing above the play to his seeker's position, distant and scanning. And even from here there was something visible in how Harry flew, not just skill but belonging, the specific ease of someone doing exactly the thing they were built for. It was beautiful in the way all technical mastery was beautiful, economical, no wasted movement. Gryffindor scored first, off a play Naruto recognized as a variant of the Wronski setup Ginny had described, Dean Thomas drawing the opposing keeper to one side while Katie Bell slipped the quaffle through the other hoop at an angle that was genuinely elegant. Ron blocked 2 shots in the first 10 minutes that had Ginny gripping Naruto's arm without knowing she was doing it. Draco was the Slytherin seeker. Naruto watched him work. He was good, technically excellent, his broom control precise enough to be impressive, and he had an eye for tracking the snitch that suggested genuine talent underneath the performance. He and Harry had been circling each other all game, 2 dots of green and red moving in and out of the main play. It happened 20 minutes in. Naruto felt it before he saw it. The resonance, always there now, always present at the edge of his awareness, spiked, not from below, from the pitch. One of the bludgers had been hit at an angle that put it wide of the play, and it was coming back, and the angle it was coming back at was going to intersect with Harry's position, and Harry hadn't seen it because he'd just found the snitch. His whole attention pointed at that tiny winged glint of gold 20 meters above the Slytherin goalposts. The Gryffindor beater was on the wrong side of the pitch. The bludger was moving very fast. Harry had no idea. Naruto moved. Not ran, moved, which was a different thing. The thing that happened when the body stopped waiting for the brain and simply acted from the place below thought where training lived. He was over the railing of the stands before conscious decision caught up. Chakra flooding his feet in the automatic way it always did when he was moving fast on an unstable surface. And he crossed the pitch diagonally at a pace that didn't register to most of the crowd as possible, because it genuinely wasn't for anyone who wasn't a ninja running at full speed on a thin line of concentrated chakra. He hit the bludger with his forearm. Not a block, not a batting motion, he redirected it, one arm under the trajectory, a sharp upward push with enough force behind it to send it off at 90 degrees and out of play. His other hand closed around Harry's broom handle for exactly half a second, arresting the slight drift that might have left Harry's timing off. He was already falling by the time Harry looked, and he tucked, rotated, landed on the pitch below in a controlled crouch that sent a small spray of turf up from his boots. The crowd was silent for precisely 3 seconds, then it was not silent at all. Harry caught the snitch. He'd kept going even during those half seconds, his hand had closed around it on reflex, the muscle memory of years taking over even while his conscious mind processed the fact that something had moved across his field of vision too fast to identify. He came down to the pitch holding the snitch and looked at Naruto standing there brushing his sleeve off and said, "What was, bludger?" Naruto said. "You didn't see it." "You," Harry looked at his arm at the snitch at the retreating bludger now being corralled by the beaters. "You ran across the pitch." "Yeah, from the stands. Yeah, in about 3 seconds. Naruto considered this. "Maybe 4, Harry stared at him. Around them the crowd had found its voice again, and the sound was extraordinary, not just Gryffindor celebration at the snitch but something more widespread, more confused, more alive, the specific electricity of a crowd that had seen something it didn't have the category for and was trying to figure out what to do about it. Draco Malfoy landed 15 meters away. He was looking at Naruto with his usual composed expression entirely unavailable to him, which was, in Naruto's experience, what genuine surprise looked like on someone who'd never expected to feel it. "That was chakra," Hermione said from the edge of the pitch. She'd come down from the stands sometime in the 3 seconds or 4 seconds or however long it had been. She was holding her notebook. "You ran on chakra across the pitch at that speed." "Yeah," Naruto said. "At what speed?" "Fast. Define fast," Ginny said appearing behind her. "Maybe let the man breathe." "I'm perfectly calm," Hermione said, writing. Ron had come off his broom and was staring at Naruto with an expression of pure, unalloyed delight. The face of someone who had just watched something magnificent and had zero complicated feelings about it. "That," Ron said, "was the best thing I have ever seen on a Quidditch pitch in my life, and I grew up watching the Chudley Cannons lose, so my frame of reference for impressive things is deliberately calibrated to a low baseline." "The Cannons aren't that bad," Naruto said. "They are," Harry said. "They really are." The crowd was still moving, reorganizing itself, and as Naruto looked up at the stands he caught Umbridge watching him from the teachers' section. She was very still. She had her clipboard. She was writing something and her expression was the smooth, fixed thing it was when she'd made a decision. He'd expected it. He filed it and turned back to the team around him. The celebration after the match was, by all accounts, the loudest the Gryffindor common room had been in 2 years. Naruto had not anticipated the scale of it. He'd been at celebrations in Konoha, victory dinners after missions and the boisterous mess of Ino's birthday, but those had a quality he knew: they tasted like his world. This was different, this particular brand of English teenage joy that expressed itself in red and gold streamers, and someone's older brother appearing with butterbeers and Fred and George Weasley arriving from somewhere they definitely weren't supposed to be. Both of them looking at Naruto with the specific calculating delight of people who had identified a kindred spirit. Fred or George, he still wasn't certain, pulled him aside by the fireplace within 20 minutes. "Right," one of them said. "How fast can you actually move?" "Faster than that," Naruto said. The other one had appeared. They were both looking at him. "And the not falling," the second one said. "Off the railing onto a flat surface at speed. That's controllable, completely. Could you do it with something in your arms? Depends on the weight." "Hypothetically," the first one said, "about 60 pounds of product distributed across 3 bags. Are those bags going anywhere they're not supposed to go?" "Categorically yes." "Then I'm definitely not helping with that," Naruto said. They looked at each other. "We like him," one said to the other. "We absolutely like him," the other agreed. He ended up in a corner with Harry sometime around midnight after the crowd had thinned and the fire had burned down. They talked around things all week, circling the real conversation the way you circled a subject that needed more space than the regular ones. He could feel it coming tonight. Something had shifted on the pitch, something about being seen acting rather than explaining, and Harry had a face that meant he'd arrived at a decision. "You weren't scared," Harry said. "When you moved, you didn't hesitate. There wasn't time to. For most people the not time becomes freezing. You did the opposite." "Training," Naruto said, "and natural." Harry was looking at the fire. "I've met a lot of brave people. A lot of people who do the right thing because they're afraid not to, which is still brave, it's just different." He paused. "You did that because you saw someone in danger and your body decided before your brain did." He stopped. "I don't know what that is. It's just who I am," Naruto said without performance. Harry was quiet for a moment, then looking at the fire. "Can I tell you something?" "Yeah, the prophecy. There's a prophecy about me and Voldemort." He said the name without flinching, which Naruto noted. "It says one of us has to kill the other, that it can't end any other way." He paused. "I've been carrying that for a year and I haven't told. I mean, Ron and Hermione know parts of it but they don't." He stopped again. "Does it change what you were going to do?" Naruto said. Harry looked at him. "What? Before you knew, were you going to go after Voldemort anyway?" A pause. "Yes, so the prophecy told you what you already knew." The fire shifted. Harry blinked. Nobody's ever put it that way. "The prophecy doesn't own you," Naruto said. "I know something about having something enormous tied to you by someone else's choice." His hand touched his own stomach automatically, the reflex he'd had since childhood. "Kurama was sealed in me the day I was born. Other people decided my path before I could walk it, but I'm not walking their path, I'm walking mine. It just happens to go through the same territory." He met Harry's eyes. "You're not a prophecy, you're a person who's going to make choices, that's all that matters." Harry looked at him for a long time. How do you carry something that big without breaking under it?" Naruto thought about Uruka's hand on his shoulder in the academy. He thought about Kakashi arriving late and being completely worth waiting for. He thought about Gaara looking at him across a desert and deciding not to be alone anymore. He thought about all the people who were him in a way, pieces of who he was, stitched into him through every moment they'd chosen to stay. "You don't carry it alone," he said. "That's literally the whole answer. You don't carry it alone." Harry's jaw moved. He looked back at the fire. He didn't say anything for a while and Naruto let the silence be what it was, which was not empty but full, the kind of silence that happened when someone was putting something real down for the first time and needed a moment to feel what it was like without it in their arms. The summons came the next morning. A note delivered by one of the castle's floating mechanisms, written in Umbridge's round handwriting on ministry-embossed paper. It was addressed to both Naruto and Tsunade, and it demanded in the syntax of a request, their presence in her office at 11 o'clock for a compliance review regarding non-registered magical beings and unsanctioned magic performed on school grounds. Tsunade read it over breakfast. She set it down. She picked up her cup of green tea. She'd negotiated green tea from the kitchens on day 2, which had apparently involved a conversation with the house elves that Naruto hadn't witnessed, but that the house elves still talked about enthusiastically. Unsanctioned magic, she said. The bludger thing, Naruto said. You use chakra in front of approximately 300 people. Someone was about to get hit. She looked at him. He looked back. The argument that followed happened entirely in the space between them and lasted about 2 seconds, and he came out of it having lost because she was usually right and also had better eyebrows. You're not wrong, she said. I'd have done the same. She looked at the note again. She's not wrong to investigate, she's wrong about what it means. She stood, folding the note. I'll handle it. We'll handle it, he said. She gave him a look. Naruto, he said, both of us. She stood there for a moment with the particular expression of someone who would never, under any circumstances, admit they were glad they weren't alone, and then she picked up her tea and walked toward the door and said, 11 o'clock, wear something presentable. He looked down at his standard shinobi gear. This is presentable, he said. She did not respond, which was different from agreement. Umbridge's office was pink in a way that constituted a philosophical position. Pink everywhere, the walls, the curtains, a collection of decorative plates featuring cats in various states of peaceful existence, a little vase of artificial flowers, a rug that was softly, insistently, entirely pink. She sat behind her desk in the center of all of it with her hands folded and her smile in place and her quill ready, and the effect was of something that had made softness into a weapon, by surrounding itself with so much of it that the hardness underneath looked like contrast. Naruto sat across from her. Tsunade stood because Tsunade stood when she wanted the physical dynamic of the room to be clear. Thank you for coming, Umbridge said warmly. Thank you for the invitation, Naruto said with equal warmth and zero sincerity, because he'd spent enough time around political situations to know that matching the register was more destabilizing than breaking it. Umbridge's smile stayed fixed. Mr. Uzumaki. Yesterday during the school sporting event you performed, she consulted her clipboard, an act of unsanctioned locomotion using what witnesses describe as a non-magical energy form. This constitutes under ministry guidelines for non-standard magical entities. I'm not a non-standard magical entity, Naruto said. I'm a shinobi. Civilian classification technically with operational status equivalent to your special forces equivalent roughly. He tilted his head. The chakra I used is a natural physiological ability, not magic. Your ministry guidelines for magic don't apply to it. Umbridge blinked. You're attempting to claim. I'm not attempting anything, he said pleasantly. I'm telling you. What I did yesterday is equivalent to any athlete using a physical ability to prevent an injury. Except my physical abilities are more developed than average. He paused. Is there a ministry regulation against catching things quickly? The quill moved. The nature of your chakra, this nine-tailed fox, constitutes a dangerous entity under the Kurama is not an entity, Tsunade said, and her voice had dropped into its professional register, the one she used in the Hokage's office when she was about to say something final. He is a sealed biju, a natural phenomenon of our world, and he has been in stable containment for 16 years. The seal is Uzumaki grade. There is no system in this building, in this country, or on this continent that could improve on it. She looked at Umbridge with the precise amber gaze that had, over the years, made experienced Jonin reconsider their life choices. I am the most qualified medical professional in either of our worlds to make that assessment. I am making it. Umbridge wrote for a moment. The ministry will need to evaluate. The ministry, Tsunade said, is welcome to send someone who can read in Uzumaki's sealing array. When they find them, we'll talk. She moved toward the door. In the meantime, what happened on that pitch was a child being protected from injury. You called us in here to make that into something it isn't. She stopped at the door and looked back at Umbridge. I've been in this castle for 8 days. I've already identified 3 students who should have been seen by a healer months ago. I've found inadequacies in your medical resourcing that I'm documenting. I've discovered something under this building that is going to require careful management. She paused. I have very little patience for rooms that are trying to make me small. She left. Naruto stood, looked at Umbridge at the fixed smile that had not moved, at the eyes above it that were very, very busy, and said, She's patient, actually extremely patient. He smiled, genuinely this time. She's been patient for about 30 years. I don't recommend being the thing that finally runs it out. He walked out. In the corridor, Tsunade was waiting, walking already, and he fell into step beside her. For a moment neither of them said anything. 3 students, he said. Neville Longbottom's right wrist has been healing wrong for about 2 years, she said quietly. Lavender Brown has chronic tension migraines being treated as headaches, and there's a Hufflepuff 4th year with an anxiety presentation that nobody's formally identified. Her voice was level. I'm going to talk to Pomfrey. She'll listen, he said. She's already listening, Tsunade said. That's why I like her. She paused. This place tries, she said, more quietly still. That matters, it tries and it falls short, and that matters differently than not trying. She looked at the stones. I'm going to help it try better. He looked at her, at the set of her jaw and the amber of her eyes and the way she was already, despite herself, despite every wall she'd built around not caring about places or institutions or the thousand ways they could hurt you, already quietly starting to care about this one. You know what this means, he said. That I'm going to be here for more than 2 months at this rate, she said. Yeah, a pause. Yes, she said, I know. They walked back toward the hospital wing and the castle moved around them, and from somewhere far below the resonance hummed its ancient patient welcome, and somewhere in the stone a seal that had been waiting 800 years for exactly this felt, in whatever way a seal could feel, that things were going in the right direction. Chapter 4. The shape of an institution. The first snow came to Hogwarts on a Tuesday. Naruto stood at the window of the library at 7 in the morning and watched it arrive. Not dramatically, not in a storm, just quietly, the way the most permanent changes sometimes came, small flakes first and then more until the grounds were covered and the lake was a steel mirror under a white sky. He'd seen snow in Konoha, but it came differently there, heavier, the mountains behind the village funneling it down. This was softer. More deliberate somehow, like Scotland was making a point about itself. He had a book open on the table behind him that he wasn't reading. He'd been at the window for 20 minutes. Kurama was quiet, which was the fox's version of thinking hard, and the seal beneath the castle was doing something new, not stronger, not more urgent, but more textured, as though the winter was waking additional layers of it the same way cold sometimes woke old injuries. You've been standing there since before I arrived, Hermione said from behind him. He hadn't heard her come in, which meant he'd been further inside his own head than usual. How long have you been here? 15 minutes. She sat down, put her bag on the table, began organizing her materials with the systematic precision that was simply her default state of being. The seal again? It changed last night. Not dramatically, but it's moving in a new direction. He turned from the window, like it's warming up for something. She looked up. Warming up for what? If I knew that, I'd have stopped staring out the window. He sat down across from her. I need to go back down tonight, deeper than last time. There's a deeper level, Kurama thinks so, below the 7th layer. He's been working on the resonance pattern, and there's a directional component we missed the first time. It's not just broadcasting, it's receiving. Something below the 7th layer is pulling signals from something else. He paused. From outside the castle. Hermione's quill stopped moving. Outside? Yeah. Naruto, if the seal is communicating with something external. I know, he said. That's why I need to find the source before it finds me. She was quiet for a moment, with the look she used when she was running calculations through a framework she hadn't fully built yet. There's a Hogwarts Board of Governors record, old from the 1500s, that mentions the navigator coming back. She flipped through her notes, the organized ecosystem of months of research that had been repurposed in the last 2 weeks entirely for this. One visit, unannounced, after the school had been operating for about 60 years. He made adjustments to the foundational wards and left again without explaining himself. She found the page. The record says he was, I'm quoting again, agitated in aspect though precise in method, and left behind him a note that was sealed and addressed to the school itself. Addressed to the school itself, Naruto said. Not to a person, to the school, as though he expected it to be read by whoever the school eventually passed it to. She looked at him. Which might be you. He sat with that for a moment. A man 800 years ago, agitated and precise, leaving a note not to anyone who was alive then but to whoever came after, whoever answered the resonance, whoever the seal was built for. Writing a letter to someone he couldn't have met but apparently expected. That level of faith in the future was something Naruto understood in his bones. He'd built his whole life on it. Find the note, he said. I'm trying, she said. It's not in any standard archive. But if it was sealed to the school itself, it might be in the castle's own record. And Hogwarts keeps its own records in the room of requirement, he said, because Harry had told him about this room and he'd been thinking about it ever since. She blinked. How did you know about the room? Harry, of course, she wrote something. The room of requirement manifests what the person needs. If we go in asking for the school's internal records, can we do that? Just ask it for records. We can ask it for anything. The question is whether the castle decides we need what we're asking for. She looked at him. I think given what you are to that seal, the castle might be inclined to cooperate. Then tonight, he said. Room of requirement first, then the lower levels. I want to come to both. He looked at her. She looked back, and there was something in her expression that was not a request but a statement, the way Sakura used to state things that she'd already decided, not asking permission but making sure the information was registered. He'd learned with Sakura and he'd learned here. Some people's determination was a form of care and arguing with it was ungrateful. Okay, he said, her shoulders relaxed a fraction. She'd been ready to fight him on it. Okay, she said, and went back to her notes, and he caught the small relief on her face before it disappeared into professionalism, and he filed it away with all the other small things he collected about the people he was deciding to know. Tsunade had been in the hospital wing every morning for 2 weeks, and in that time the hospital wing had become a different room. Not physically, the beds were where they'd always been, the potions cabinet was where it lived, the particular smell of a medical space that existed at the edge of institutional and caring was still present. But something had changed in the atmosphere of it, the same way a room changed when someone with a specific quality of attention walked in and stayed. It had to do with Tsunade's hands on a patient, the way she listened with her whole body, the way she asked questions that got to what was actually wrong rather than the complaint presented, the way she fixed things completely rather than managing them. Pomfrey had watched it for 3 days and then started asking questions, and the questions had led to demonstrations. And the demonstrations had developed into the most academically productive conversation Pomfrey had ever had in 31 years, and now they worked side by side in a comfortable complementary silence that had taken Naruto completely by surprise and Tsunade not at all. You expected it, he said the evening before the snow, finding her in the hospital wing after dinner making notes on a joint methodology for post-Quidditch impact injuries. I expected someone competent, she said, not looking up. Competent people who respect the work generally get along. Pomfrey looked like she wanted to argue with you for the first 3 days. She did argue with me, she argued well. Tsunade made a notation. I respect that more than agreement. She paused. She's been using Skillgrow as a first-line treatment for fractures. It works, but it's like treating a paper cut with a tourniquet. She listened when I explained the more targeted approach. She adapted it. She asked better questions the second time. She finally looked up. That's a good healer. Neville Longbottom's wrist had been the first thing. Tsunade had pulled him aside after a session with Pomfrey, sat him down with the matter-of-factness she used so the recipient didn't feel like a specimen, and explained in clear terms what had happened to his wrist and why it kept aching in cold weather and what they were going to do about it. He'd sat very still and listened with the face of someone being told something that explained a pain they'd been told was imaginary, which was a face Naruto recognized and hated seeing. Did someone tell you it wasn't worth treating? Tsunade had asked. Neville had looked at his wrist. They said it healed fine. It healed, she'd said, not fine. She'd put her hands over the wrist, chakra flowing in the careful diagnostic way, and she'd fixed it in 40 minutes fully, not managed it, not reduced it, fixed it, and Neville had flexed his hand after and his face had done something extraordinary, the particular look of absence of a pain so long present that its removal felt like a new sense opening. He'd said, I've had that for 6 years. And Tsunade had said very simply, not anymore. Naruto had been in the corner of the room for that. He'd looked at his feet and not at her face because she'd learned to not let him see what it cost her, caring about people after years of building walls against it, but he was a censor and he always knew anyway, and he gave her the dignity of pretending he didn't. The Neville thing had gotten around. Not because Neville told people, he didn't, at least not at first, but because people noticed that he'd stopped favoring his right hand in herbology and someone asked, and it was Hogwarts and Hogwarts talked. By the end of the week there were 3 students outside the hospital wing asking to see the visiting healer about things they'd been told were fine. None of them were fine. Soon it saw all of them. Pomfrey, watching this, had started calling her colleague. The meeting with Dumbledore that Tuesday, the snow day, the day he and Hermione had their library conversation, happened not in Dumbledore's office but in the corridor outside it, which was Naruto's fault for arriving at a different time than scheduled and meeting Dumbledore coming the other direction. They fell into step together naturally, which Naruto had noticed was how his conversations with Dumbledore tended to happen, mobile, unhurried, the walking itself doing something for the quality of the talk. I need to ask you something directly, Naruto said. Please, Dumbledore said without a trace of wariness. You know more about what's under this castle than you've said. The corridor was empty. Outside the windows the snow was still falling. Dumbledore walked with his hands behind his back, his half-moon glasses catching the gray morning light. Yes, he said simply. Not no, you're mistaken, or I've told you what I know, or the careful redirection he'd used in the first meeting. Just yes. Naruto looked at him. Tell me. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment, not the silence of evasion but the silence of someone organizing something they'd been holding for a long time. I found references to the Navigator when I was 17, he said. In my own research, I was interested in the origins of Hogwarts' foundational magic. a theoretical interest that I pursued for years before I came here as a teacher. He paused. The references suggested that the school had been built on a site that was already magically significant, pre-existing, and that the navigator, an outsider, someone from a tradition completely outside the European magical one, had identified it and helped establish it. You knew about chakra, Naruto said. I knew about a non-standard magical energy that predated Western runic tradition, Dumbledore said carefully. I had no framework for it. The references I found called it various things: living energy, breath force, the thread beneath. I couldn't identify it from description alone. He looked at Naruto sideways. When you arrived, I recognized it within the first hour of meeting you. The quality of it, what the old records had been failing to describe. And the seal. I have known there was something significant beneath the castle for 30 years, Dumbledore said. I could feel it as I said, but it was completely dormant, inert. There was nothing to investigate because there was nothing active to investigate. He paused. Until the night you arrived, something changed the moment your rift opened. I felt it from the village. He stopped walking. They were at a window now, the ground spread white below them. I didn't extend you an invitation out of generosity, Naruto. I know, Naruto said. I extended it because you woke something I've been worried about for 30 years and I needed to understand what you were before I could understand what it meant. He met Naruto's eyes directly. I should have been more honest about that from the beginning. Naruto looked at him. Dumbledore's blue eyes were steady and direct, and the weight behind them was real, not guilt exactly, but the particular heaviness of someone who was accounting for a thing honestly rather than defensively. Why weren't you? Naruto said. Because, Dumbledore said with a careful honesty that cost him something, I have a habit of managing information rather than sharing it, and I justify it to myself as protecting people, and it sometimes is and sometimes isn't, and I don't always know which one it is until it's too late. He paused. Severus Snape once told me I treat people like chess pieces while believing I'm treating them like people. He was not entirely wrong. The window snow outside fell sideways for a moment, caught by wind. All right, Naruto said. Dumbledore looked at him. That's it? You told the truth when I asked directly. That matters, he shrugged. I don't hold the before against people if the after is honest. Life's too short. He paused. Also, I'm used to leaders who think they're protecting you by controlling information. Comes with the territory. He turned from the window. So here's what I know that I think you need to know. He told Dumbledore everything. The seventh layer, the welcoming pattern, Kurama's read on the protective intent, the external communication Kurama had identified the night before, Hermione's theory about the navigator's return visit and the note addressed to the school. He told it clean and fast, the way he briefed Tsunade, not editing for comfort, not shaping for effect, just the information in the order it mattered. Dumbledore listened with complete unbroken attention. When Naruto finished, the old wizard was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, the external communication. Do you have a sense of what it's communicating with? Not yet, tonight I'll go deeper. I'd like to come, Dumbledore said. Naruto looked at him. Then come. He said it simply, and Dumbledore's eyebrows rose slightly, not because he'd expected to be denied, Naruto thought, but because he'd expected negotiation. Expected to have to justify himself or ask more carefully. Getting a simple yes immediately without conditions was apparently not what this particular man was used to getting. It was almost funny. I'd also like to suggest, Dumbledore said after a moment, that the defense against the dark arts class this Thursday could benefit from your involvement. Formally, as not a teacher, you're right that it isn't the right framing, but as someone who demonstrates. I already do that, Naruto said. I mean sanctioned, in front of the full class. With time, with proper structure. He looked at Naruto with something careful in his expression. Dolores has been increasingly active in her objections to your presence. A formal role gives you standing she can't easily challenge. She's going to escalate, Naruto said. Almost certainly. Dumbledore's voice was measured. She has significant ministry support, and she is not whatever else she is not unintelligent. She knows the students responded to you on the Quidditch pitch. She knows you disrupted her classroom. She is looking for a mechanism to contain you, and she will find one eventually if you have no formal standing. You're trying to protect us, Naruto said, not accusatory, just noting it. I'm trying, Dumbledore said, to give you tools. What you do with them is your own. Naruto thought about it for about 2 seconds. Fine. Thursday, but I'm not teaching your curriculum, I'm teaching what's actually useful. I would expect nothing else, Dumbledore said, and the warmth in it was real. Thursday arrived the way important things arrived, preceded by so much anticipation that the thing itself almost couldn't compete. The entire school apparently knew. Naruto didn't know how the entire school knew because he'd only told Harry and Hermione and Ron, and somehow by Wednesday morning, there were third years who had never met him asking if it was true he was teaching defense. "I'm not teaching it," he said to the latest group asking, a cluster of Hufflepuff fourth years in the corridor outside the Great Hall. "I'm demonstrating." "What's the difference?" one of them asked. "Teaching is when you know everything," Naruto said. "Demonstrating is when you know one thing really well." He looked at them. "What I know is how to survive a fight. Surviving doesn't require knowing everything, it requires knowing enough." They considered this with the focused expressions of people encountering an idea in a new shape. The defense classroom on Thursday was full. Legitimately full, not the usual sixth-year complement but sixth years and curious fifth years, who had convinced their teachers they had free periods, and one very small second year who was clearly prepared to be removed if necessary but had decided to try anyway, sitting in the back row with his hands folded and his face arranged in an expression of absolute nonchalance. Naruto saw him and didn't say anything. Umbridge was in the room. She was standing at the side wall in her ministry observer position, clipboard at the ready, smile calibrated to the setting, not hostile, not warm, just present in the way that official monitoring was present, letting itself be felt. He stood at the front of the room and looked at the class. They looked back. He felt the weight of the attention, not nervous energy, just the particular force of a lot of people paying the same kind of notice, like standing in a beam of light. "Last time," he said, "we talked about not freezing. Your body's default in a dangerous situation is to stop and process. That costs you time you don't have." He moved to the center of the room. "Today we're going to talk about reading a situation. Not reacting, reading, because the fastest fighters I've ever seen aren't fast because they move quickly. They're fast because they understand what's happening before it does." He looked around the room. "I need a volunteer, someone who genuinely wants to come at me." Several hands went up. He pointed at Dean Thomas. "Come on," he said. Dean stood, looking slightly uncertain now that the moment was real. He had his wand out. "No wand," Naruto said. "Not yet. What am I? What should I do?" "Exactly what you'd do if you were actually trying to take me down." He spread his hands. "Don't be polite about it." Dean came at him. It was a telegraph tackle, his weight committed forward, and Naruto sidestepped at about 1/10 of his actual capability, just enough to not be where Dean arrived, and put a hand gently on Dean's shoulder as he passed that redirected the momentum into a controlled forward pitch rather than a fall. Dean stood up. "You barely moved." "I barely needed to," Naruto said. "You telegraphed the direction 2 steps early." He looked at the class. What did he do? Who saw it? Hermione's hand went up. So did Ginny's, a Hufflepuff girl in the third row. Harry, who hadn't raised his hand but was already nodding. His shoulders rotated before his feet committed, the Hufflepuff girl said. Right shoulder dropped. "Exactly," Naruto said. He looked at the girl. "What's your name?" "Hannah Abbott." "Hannah, come up." She came up, looking startled. "Show me how you'd come at someone if you wanted to not telegraph." She looked at him. She thought about it. He could see her thinking the genuine analytical engagement rather than performance, and then she moved differently. Squarer, less committed weight, not better but more aware. "Good instinct," he said. "You thought about what you were doing instead of just doing it. That's the second step. The first is seeing the tell. The second is removing your own." He looked at the class. "The third step is what we're going to spend today on, understanding intention." He spent the next half hour in something that was neither a lecture nor a sparring session but something in between, moving through the class, asking them to move against each other, watching and commenting, using what they showed him to illustrate the point he was building toward. They were responsive. That was the thing about this class, this particular mix of people. They'd been wanting to do something real for long enough that when the opportunity arrived they threw themselves into it with a genuine energy that was infectious. Neville blocked a reach from Ron with his right arm, the fixed arm, Tsunade's work, and there was a split second where he registered that it hadn't hurt and his face opened like a door. Naruto caught it, filed it. He brought them back together after the practical section and looked at the room. "The best defense," he said, "isn't a spell or a technique, it's awareness, knowing what's in your environment, knowing where threats can come from before they do." He paused. "Can someone tell me what threats are in this room right now?" Silence. Then Harry carefully said, "The door, anyone could come in." "Good, what else?" "The windows," Hermione said. "Ground level, no, we're on the second floor, so they'd need flight or levitation, but it's a vulnerability." "The fireplace," said the small second year from the back row, and the room turned to look at him and he went slightly red but didn't retract it. "Flue, someone could come through." "What's your name?" Naruto said. "Colin Creevy." "You're right, Colin." He looked at the class. "And what else?" A pause. Nobody said it. "Someone in this room," Naruto said, not looking at the wall, "has been writing down everything that happened since I walked in. Every time I move, every response from the class, every name I use. He finally looked at the side wall. That's a threat too. Not a physical one, but information in the wrong hands before you're ready for it to be there. That's one of the oldest dangers there is. The class turned to look at Umbridge. Umbridge's smile was absolutely immovable. Her quill had stopped. The ability to read a room, Naruto said back to the class, voice completely level, includes knowing who in the room is recording you and why. He let that sit for exactly 3 seconds. All right, wands out. Let's work on the shield charm. I want to see what you've actually got. He'd never technically learned the shield charm, but he'd watched it thrown 20 times in the past 3 weeks, and he understood its mechanics well enough to evaluate execution, and he spent the rest of the class moving through pairs, watching form, identifying where the energy was going wrong, describing what he saw in terms they understood. Your weight is back, push from your center. It's not a deflection, it's a commitment, and by the end of the period the room was doing something different. Doing it better. Not because of the spell. Because they understood what it was for. When the bell went and the students filed out, some of them flushed and talking and alive with it, Umbridge approached him. She waited until the room was nearly empty. She had the clipboard, she had the smile. A very spirited session, she said. Thanks, he said, packing nothing because he'd brought nothing. There are a few items of ministry concern I'd like to discuss regarding the, send it in writing, he said, to Dumbledore. He can bring it to me. He looked at her and his face was completely open, no challenge, no aggression, just direct and clear. I'm not trying to make your job hard. I genuinely think these kids need this, and I think you know they do too. That's the part I can't figure out. He tilted his head. You're not stupid, you can see what they need, so why? The ministry, she said, and something in the sweetness had tight, determines what students need. Not visiting, determining what people need from a distance without asking them, he said, is how people get hurt. I've seen it. He met her eyes. Good institutions don't do that. He left. In the corridor, Harry was waiting. She's going to do something, Harry said. After that, yeah, Naruto said. Aren't you worried? About what? About what? She'll. Harry stopped. Right. You don't have anything she can take. I don't, Naruto said. You do, though. He looked at Harry directly. If she comes at your people because of me. Don't, Harry said with a quiet firmness that was new, something that had solidified in him over the past weeks, a weight behind his words that hadn't been there before. Don't tell me to distance myself from you to stay safe. I've been safe and small for long enough. It didn't help anything. Naruto looked at him for a moment, then he said, okay. Okay, Harry said. They walked toward the Great Hall for lunch, and Ron fell in beside them from somewhere to the left, and Hermione appeared from the library behind them, still writing, and Ginny came down the stairs ahead and turned and saw them and waited, and the 5 of them moved through the corridor in the easy configuration of people who had stopped being strangers without quite noticing it happening. Draco Malfoy was outside the Great Hall. He was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, with the expression of someone who had stationed himself there specifically and was trying to make it look casual. His eyes tracked to Naruto and stayed there with a quality Naruto hadn't seen from him before. Not contempt, not the performance of contempt, something underneath both that was more honest and more uncomfortable. Word is you made Umbridge look like an idiot in defense, Draco said. I taught a class, Naruto said, without a wand. Draco's eyes moved over him in the assessing way of someone who did threat assessment reflexively as a trained survival mechanism. What you did on the Quidditch pitch, that wasn't magic. Chakra, Naruto said. I've explained this to other people, Draco said. Not to me. Naruto stopped. Harry and the others moved past them, Harry with a look that said, you sure? And Naruto with a slight nod that said, I'm fine, and then it was just him and Draco in the corridor, students flowing around them. You want me to explain it to you specifically, Naruto said. Draco's jaw tightened. I want to understand what you are, he said with a direct rawness that was clearly costing him something, so I can stop not understanding it. That was, Naruto thought, one of the most honest things Draco Malfoy had said to him, possibly to anyone. Chakra is the life energy every living thing produces, Naruto said, with the same matter-of-fact tone he used for anyone asking a genuine question. Most people can't access it. I can because I was trained to from childhood, and because he paused, considering how much to give, because what's sealed in me amplifies it significantly. The fox, Kurama, yeah, and that makes you. Draco made a gesture that encompassed the Quidditch incident, the defense class, Naruto's general physical capability. It makes me something different from a wizard, Naruto said. Not better, different. He looked at Draco steadily. You're trying to figure out where to put me in your hierarchy of things. Draco's expression flickered. I don't, you do, Naruto said simply. It's how you're wired, everything has a place, blood, status, house, family. I don't fit the system and that bothers you. He tilted his head. What would help? What would help? Talking through it, a fight. He said it without aggression, just offerings. Sometimes people need to actually put their hands on something to understand it. Draco stared at him. The mask was completely off now, not dramatically, just incrementally stripped away by too many moments of Naruto refusing to meet performance with performance. "You'd spar with me," he said. "Sure," Naruto said, "if that's what you need." "I don't need anything from you," Draco said, reflexive, immediate, the old pattern. "Okay," Naruto said, without any particular response to it. "The offer's there." He walked into the Great Hall. Behind him, Draco stood in the corridor for a moment longer than he needed to, and Naruto heard him eventually follow, and he filed the sound of it, not victory, just the slow mechanics of someone deciding maybe to take a first step towards something they didn't have a name for yet. The evening happened in 3 parts, the room of requirement first. Naruto went with Hermione, who had clearly been planning this for days and had a list of specific requests she intended to make of the room, organized by priority. They stood in the 7th floor corridor in front of the stretch of blank wall, and he felt the castle's attention focus in the particular way it did now, a quality of awareness that he'd stopped finding unsettling and started finding almost conversational. He thought clearly about what he needed: the navigator's records, the note addressed to the school, anything the castle itself held about what was beneath it. The door appeared. Inside was not a room but a reading space, warm, small, a single table with a lamp, and on the table, as though someone had set it there in advance, a sealed scroll. Not a book, a scroll. Old, the paper, a material he recognized, not parchment, not vellum, but the compressed fiber used in scroll making from an entirely different part of the world. The seal on it was a basic closure seal, Uzumaki adjacent as Kurama had said, and it was addressed in characters that were 800 years old and slightly archaic but legible. "To the one who wakes what I have built. This is overdue. I'm sorry for the wait." Naruto stared at that for a moment. Hermione made a sound that might have been a gasp and might have been her simply forgetting to breathe. He broke the seal. The scroll unrolled itself with the particular deliberateness of something that had been waiting a long time to be read. The characters inside were a mix, some in an ancient notation system he needed Kurama to partially interpret, some in early Latin, some in what Hermione identified on sight as Proto-Norse runic. They read it together, Hermione translating the runic portions, Kurama reading the older notation, Naruto synthesizing in the middle. The navigator's name, as it turned out, was Hiroshi. Not Hiroshi Namikawa, the sealing master whose posthumous scroll had sent them here, but Hiroshi, a name from the same naming tradition, from the same clan origin, writing 800 years ago in the same fundamental sealing philosophy that the Uzumaki had carried down through generations. Not the same man, but the same line. A distant ancestor or a parallel branch or something in between that the record wasn't precise enough to clarify. He had come to Scotland because he had read something in the natural energy of the land, the confluence of ley lines and what he called earth chakra, the ambient natural energy that saturated certain places, and understood that it would be significant. Not to him, to someone who came after. He had built the seal as a tool. Not a weapon, not a trap, a tool, specifically designed to help a Jinchuriki navigate a world that didn't understand what they were. It was a translation mechanism. At full activation it would create a bridge, not dimensional, not the physics-breaking type of bridge Naruto had already come through, but an interpretive one, between chakra-based energy and the magical energy of this world. A way for the two systems to speak to each other rather than around each other. What it was communicating with externally, Kurama read with increasing attention as they reached the latter section of the scroll, was the ley line network itself. The natural energy grid of the island, buried in the geography older than any human magic. It was trying to teach the land to speak chakra. Naruto sat back from that and felt the scale of it settle over him. 800 years, Hermione said very quietly. He spent years building this and then he waited for 800 years for the right person. He didn't wait, Naruto said. He trusted. Different thing. She looked at him. What's the difference? Waiting assumes you might be wrong. Trust assumes you won't be. He looked at the scroll. He trusted someone was coming who could finish what he started. He paused. He just got the timeline a bit wrong. She almost laughed. A bit. 800 years is a bit, he said. In geological terms. The second part of the evening was the lower chamber. Dumbledore came as agreed, and the 5 of them, Naruto, Tsunade, Dumbledore, Hermione, Harry, who had invited himself and been allowed, went down past the 7th layer into the deep stone of the castle's foundations. The 8th layer was not carved. It was grown patterns that had emerged in the rock itself over 800 years of slow chakra saturation. the way mineral deposits formed around something that produced heat. They were less precise than the carved layers, but more alive, responsive, moving in a slow geological way that was visible only if you watched carefully. The resonance here was strong enough that Naruto could feel it in his teeth. Dumbledore stood at the edge of the grown layer and looked at it with an expression that had shed every layer of performance and left something underneath that was simply human. A man looking at something that had been here longer than him and would be here after, and being moved by it. "He built this for you," Dumbledore said. "For whoever I was going to be," Naruto said. "He didn't know me." "He knew what you'd carry," Tsunade said from beside him. She was reading the grown patterns with her hands raised over them, not touching, just sensing. The note said he'd met a Jinchuriki once, one in his entire life before he came here. He understood what it meant to hold something that vast. She lowered her hands. "This is an apology as much as a gift from someone who understood what it cost." The chamber was quiet. Naruto looked at the patterns in the rock. He thought about Hiroshi, 800 years ago in a world that had no word for what he was, building something enormous and careful and patient for a person he'd never meet. Not because he'd been asked to, not because there was any guarantee it would be used, but because he understood what it felt like to be the kind of person who needed it, and he had the skill to do something about it. He thought about what Kurama had said, protective, trying to protect something, or someone, not something, someone. Some future, unnamed, inevitable someone who would fall into the wrong world at the wrong time and need a hand. He crouched at the edge of the grown layer and put his palm flat on the stone, not the carved lines but the rock between them, and he felt the resonance come up through his hand like a pulse, warm, familiar, the welcoming pattern Kurama had identified, but clearer now, louder, almost specific. "Hello," it said in the language below language. He said hello back in the only way he knew how, which was to let the chakra move through him openly, without containing it, without the usual disciplined management, just let it be what it was, his and Kurama's both, the full improbable fact of what they were together. The 8th layer lit up. Not dramatically, not like a switch thrown, more like sunrise, gradual and inevitable, the grown patterns brightening from the point of contact outward in slow, warm increments. The resonance changed. The external communication thread that Kurama had identified, the signal going out to the ley line network, strengthened, clarified, became something with shape and direction. Hermione made a sound of pure wonder. Dumbledore said nothing, which was the most eloquent response available. Tsunade watched with her arms crossed and her eyes bright, and she said quietly, so only Naruto could hear, "You know what activating this fully means?" "Yeah," he said, hand still on the stone. "It means finishing what he started. The translation mechanism, if it completes, the two energy systems start bridging. Chakra and magic communicating." She paused. "That changes things for both worlds. I know. It might make the rift home easier to open," she said, "or harder, we don't know which." He looked at the brightening patterns. "Does it matter right now?" A pause. "No," she said. "Right now it matters that you're exactly where you're supposed to be." He kept his hand on the stone and felt the castle breathe. And somewhere in the upper floors 300 students were doing homework and arguing and falling in love and being afraid and being brave. And somewhere above that Umbridge was writing her reports. And somewhere in Hogsmeade the snow was still falling. And somewhere in the ley line network below them, something ancient was beginning very slowly to wake up and say back what Hiroshi had spent 800 years teaching it. The third part of the evening was not planned. He found Draco Malfoy on the 7th floor corridor on his way back up. Not there by accident, the Slytherin dormitories were nowhere near the 7th floor, and Draco was sitting on a window seat looking at the snow outside with his robes less perfect than usual and his face without the mask. Just a boy 17 looking at weather and thinking something that was visibly too heavy for the container. Naruto sat on the other end of the window seat. Draco looked at him, didn't tell him to leave. "My father," Draco said after a moment, "is in Azkaban." Naruto was quiet. "He made choices," Draco said with the precision of someone who had rehearsed impartiality. "I understand that the choices are why he's there." A pause. "I'm also supposed to make choices. Choices that are in the same direction." He looked at the snow. "And I don't know if I want to." "That's the most important thing you've said to anyone in a while," Naruto said. Draco looked at him sharply. "How would you know?" "Because the rest of it is performance," Naruto said. "What you just said, that's you." He met Draco's eyes, "Not wanting to go where you're being pushed, that's the real thing." Draco was quiet. Outside the snow fell in silence. "What do you do?" Draco said very carefully, "when the thing you're supposed to be and the thing you actually are aren't the same thing?" Naruto thought about the academy. He thought about dead last, about the empty apartment, about the headband earned against every expectation and the first person who'd looked at him and seen something worth seeing. He thought about every time the world had handed him a definition of himself and he'd chosen, not without difficulty, not without cost, to write his own. "You decide," he said. And it's hard and you decide again and it's still hard. And eventually it starts being easier but you're never done deciding. He looked at Draco, but the fact that you're asking the question means you've already started. Draco looked at his hands. It's not that simple. No, Naruto said, but the first step usually is. The snow fell. The castle breathed. The seal below them pulsed with warm light that nobody upstairs could see, and 800 years of waiting had become something else, something moving, something that was no longer waiting at all. Chapter 5, What Breaks and What Holds. The first student collapsed on a Wednesday morning in Charms. Naruto was 2 corridors away when it happened, walking back from breakfast with Ron, who was explaining the rules of exploding snap with the evangelical energy of someone who had decided this was important information, when Kurama went sharp and still in the way he did when something relevant had happened at a distance. The seal, the fox said. Something discharged, not discharged like a weapon, like a circuit breaker, something that had been holding too much current and released some to protect itself. Naruto felt it as a pressure drop, quick and clean, there and gone. He was moving before he'd finished understanding it, Ron cutting off mid-sentence and following without asking why, because in 3 weeks he'd learned that when Naruto moved suddenly, it was worth following first and asking second. The Charms corridor was already crowded by the time they got there, students pressed against the walls, Professor Flitwick crouching beside a Hufflepuff 6th year who was on the floor, conscious but unsteady, her hands pressed flat on the stone like she was trying to anchor herself to something. Susan Bones. Naruto knew her from 3 shared study sessions in the library, quiet, precise, fiercely loyal to her house and her friends, with a grief running underneath her that she'd given no name to in his presence but that he'd felt in the quality of her silences. Her aunt had been an Auror, past tense. He knew what that meant. Crouched beside Flitwick, who looked up at him with a worried expression that was also somehow professionally controlled. She dropped, Flitwick said. No warning, Midwingardium Leviosa. Naruto put his hand near Susan's shoulder, not touching, just sensing. Her magical energy was chaotic, spinning in the wrong direction like a compass put near a magnet. But underneath it was something else, a chakra-adjacent resonance faint that shouldn't have been there at all. The seal had touched her. Not maliciously, not deliberately. The brightening of the 8th layer from the night before had sent something upward through the castle's foundation, a kind of overflow, and Susan, whose magical sensitivity was higher than average and whose natural energy was running depleted from sustained grief, had caught the edge of it like a radio receiving a frequency it wasn't built for. Tsunade, he said, standing. He looked at Ron. Get Tsunade. Ron was already gone. Flitwick had his wand out, murmuring diagnostic spells, his expression doing the rapid calculation of someone running through possibilities and not landing on one. I can't find a curse, he said. No hex, no jinx. Her magical signature is destabilized, but there's no external cause I can identify. It's not a curse, Naruto said. He paused because the full explanation was going to take longer than they had. It's something that came up from below. I'll explain properly when she's stable. Flitwick looked at him with the focused attention of someone choosing in real time to trust information they didn't fully understand because the alternative was less useful. What do we need? She needs to be grounded, Naruto said. Her system's picking up a frequency it doesn't know how to process. We need to regulate it until Tsunade can do the rest. How do we ground her? Naruto thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. Physical contact, someone she trusts whose own magical signature is stable. Skin contact, hands. He looked at the gathered students. Is there someone here she's close to? Hannah, Susan said from the floor in a thin voice. Hannah Abbott. Hannah was already pushing forward from the crowd, her face set in the specific determination of someone who didn't know what was happening, but had decided that being in motion was better than watching. She dropped to her knees beside Susan and took her hands without being asked. And Naruto watched Susan's chaotic magical signature begin to dampen slowly, not completely, but measurably. Tsunade arrived 90 seconds later, still pulling her coat on, Pomfrey 3 steps behind. She took one look at Susan, crouched, put 2 fingers to her wrist in the clinical way that meant she was doing a full energetic read, and said without looking up, chakra overflow. The seal discharged upward and she caught a residual wave. She looked at Naruto. How many others? He hadn't thought about others. He reached out immediately, sensor mode, feeling through the castle the way he might feel through water, and found 3 more signatures with the same destabilized quality. Not dropped yet, but running hot. 3 more, he said. All in the vicinity of the astronomy tower side. They'd be in the path of the overflow if it went up through the east foundation. He was already moving. I'll find them. Go, Tsunade said, already working. I've got this one. He went. He found the 3 students in the order their signatures reached him. A Ravenclaw 3rd year who was sitting on the floor of an empty classroom looking at his hands with confused attention. A Gryffindor 7th year named Lee Jordan who was complaining to a portrait that his head felt like it was full of static. And Neville Longbottom, who was in Greenhouse 3 tending to a venomous tentacula and had simply sat down in the dirt when the wave hit him because sitting down was the correct response to feeling suddenly and entirely wrong. Neville was fine. He said so in a remarkably calm voice that suggested he'd decided, somewhere in his own development, that alarming situations were more manageable if you didn't add alarm to them. He let Naruto check his energy signature, confirmed the static feeling was fading, and then pointed at the tentacula and said, "Can you hold that branch while I finish the pruning? It'll get aggressive if I leave it half done." Naruto held the branch. It tried to bite him twice. He held it anyway. "The castle did this," Neville said, working with his clippers. "The seal under the castle," Naruto said. "I activated something last night and it discharged more than I expected." Neville was quiet for a moment. "I've always been able to feel the castle," he said simply like it was an unremarkable thing. "Since first year, not words or anything, just moods, whether it was happy or uneasy." He cut a branch clean and precise. "Last night it felt different, not bad different, like it had remembered something." Naruto looked at him. "You never mentioned that." "Nobody ever asked," Neville said without accusation. "Also nobody would have believed me." The tentacula made a sound that might have been agreement. Naruto tightened his grip on the branch. By lunchtime, all 4 students were stabilized. Tsunade had written a 2-page assessment of what had happened that she handed to both Dumbledore and Pomfrey with equal directness. And the atmosphere in the castle had taken on a specific quality, not panic, not fear, but the electric attention of a community that had felt something and was trying to name it. Naruto sat in Dumbledore's office at 1 in the afternoon with Tsunade, Hermione, Harry, and Flitwick, who had been included because Tsunade had said, "He reads energy signatures better than anyone on your staff and we need that now," which Flitwick had responded to by standing 2 inches taller than his usual already compact height. "The 8th layer is active," Naruto said, "fully active now, and it's doing what the navigator built it to do, translating. It's broadcasting chakra frequency through the castle's foundation and the castle is transmitting it upward through the ley lines. The students who were affected are the most magically sensitive ones in the building. Their systems picked up the new frequency before they had any context for it." "Will it happen again?" Dumbledore said. "Yes," Tsunade said. "Without management, the discharge will recur as the seal completes its activation. The resonance is building towards something, a full translation event, I think. When the 2 systems fully bridge." She looked at Naruto. "How long?" Kurama had been running calculations since the chamber. "Days," the fox said, "not weeks. The activation last night accelerated the timeline significantly. 3 days, maybe 4. 3 or 4 days," Naruto said. "The room absorbed that. And when it bridges," Hermione said with the focused urgency of someone working a problem in real time, "what happens? The ley network starts transmitting chakra frequency signals. Does that affect the students permanently? Does it change the magical environment of the castle?" "I don't know exactly," Naruto said. The navigator's scroll described it as a translation layer, not replacing what's there but adding a channel. The castle would be able to process both. He paused. "It should make both systems more accessible, not less. But the transition is the dangerous part," Tsunade said. "While the 2 systems are aligning, the students with the highest sensitivity are going to keep catching overflow." She looked at Dumbledore. "I need to identify every high-sensitivity student in the school and I need to do it today." "How?" Flitwick said. "Simple, energetic diagnostic. I can adapt the base form of it to something compatible with your diagnostic spells. Phileas, if you're willing to work on it with me this afternoon." "Absolutely," Flitwick said immediately and without any of the hesitation Naruto might have expected from someone being asked to immediately redesign a diagnostic methodology. He had Naruto thought, the quality of someone who had never once in his life, thought that the way things were currently done was automatically the correct way. "I'll get my notes on the standard diagnostic charm. We can start with the base waveform and after lunch," Tsunade said. "Eat first, you'll think better." "Right, yes. Of course." He looked slightly startled to be told to eat by someone he'd just met, in the way that very dedicated people were always startled to be reminded that they had bodies. Naruto caught Harry's eye across the table. Harry had been quiet through most of the meeting, listening with the focused attention he used when he was building towards something rather than just absorbing. He had a question. He was deciding whether to ask it. Naruto waited. If the transition is the dangerous part, Harry said, and we have 3 or 4 days, shouldn't we try to speed it up? Rather than managing the overflow for 4 days, just push it through. The room looked at him. That's actually, Hermione said slowly, not a bad instinct. It's a good instinct, Tsunade said, and Harry looked faintly surprised to receive a direct compliment from her because she didn't give them without meaning them, and most people had clocked that. The question is whether pushing it through creates a larger discharge event that we can't manage versus smaller ongoing events we can. She looked at Naruto. Can the activation be controlled, directed? Yes, Kurama said, and he said it with the certainty of someone who had been thinking about exactly this since the chamber. I can regulate the discharge rate. If we go back down tonight and I set the emission pattern deliberately, a controlled escalation rather than a natural one, we can complete the activation in a single event. Larger than anything so far but contained, a pause if you're there to anchor it. Kurama can manage it, Naruto said. I need to be in the chamber during the full activation and he'll regulate the discharge rate. One event controlled instead of ongoing overflow. He looked at the room. The students who are already sensitized will need to be in a protected environment during it, somewhere stable, away from the foundation. The Great Hall, Flitwick said. The foundational wards there are secondary to the main building, less directly connected to the ley lines. If I reinforce the ambient shielding, I can help with that, Hermione said, already pulling parchment out. And the students in the hospital wing should be moved, Pomfrey said. She'd arrived late silently and had been standing at the back of the room with her arms folded listening. To the wing on the north side, furthest from the east foundation. It was, Naruto noted, the particular quality of a room that had decided to solve something and was doing it together. Each person picking up the thread that matched their capability. No jostling for position, no ego about it, just the straightforward efficiency of people who were good at what they did, and had decided the situation mattered more than their individual relevance to it. He felt something warm about it that he recognized as the feeling of watching people be their best selves and knowing it. Umbridge found him at 3 in the afternoon, not in a corridor this time. She was waiting outside the library, specifically waiting in the deliberate way that said she had chosen the location for a reason, and she had 2 people with her that he hadn't seen before. Not teachers. Adults in ministry robes, one of them holding what appeared to be a containment device of some kind, a metal-banded case that he read with Kurama's help as warded, the wards calibrated to suppress magical energy signatures. He looked at the case. He looked at Umbridge. "Dollars," he said pleasantly. Mr. Uzumaki, she had the clipboard, she had the smile. She had the quality today of someone who had made a decision she'd been working toward for weeks and had arrived at the moment of it with a particular satisfaction. I'm afraid the ministry has completed its review of your status under the decree for the regulation of magical creatures. I'm not a magical creature, he said. And has determined that the entity sealed within you constitutes an unregistered dangerous being under. Kurama is not a being under any category your ministry has, Naruto said, still pleasant, still completely unconcerned. You'd need to create a new one, which the ministry has done, she said, and produced a document from under her clipboard. Emergency classification, effective this morning. The nine-tailed fox entity is hereby classified as a Class X restricted being, and you as its container are required to submit to temporary containment pending full evaluation of. No, Naruto said. She blinked. Mr. Uzumaki, number, he said it the same way he'd said the first one, simply without heat or aggression, just the word with all his weight behind it. I'm going to explain this once. The Kyuubi seal is an Uzumaki masterwork that took my father his life to complete. It has been stable for 16 years. There is no evaluation your ministry can run that will tell you more about it than Tsunade already has. And the containment device your colleague is holding, he glanced at the man with the case, is warded for magical suppression, which will not work on chakra, which means if you put me in it, the only thing you'll accomplish is trapping a person in a box. The ministry has authority over British wizards, he said. I'm a shinobi of the Hidden Leaf Village. Your ministry's authority ends at the boundary of your legal jurisdiction, which does not include me. He tilted his head. If you want to argue international sovereignty, Tsunade is significantly better at that conversation than I am, and she'll enjoy having it. The 2 ministry officials were looking at him with a range of expressions. One of them had the look of someone who'd been told a situation would be simple, and was processing that it wasn't, and the other had a more interesting expression, which was the specific look of someone who had been doing their job under instruction, and was quietly internally beginning to question the instruction. Umbridge's smile had not changed, but the temperature behind it had dropped several degrees. You are, at present, on British soil, The ministry has made a political decision, Naruto said, dressed up as a legal one. I understand how that works. He met her eyes. Here's what's going to happen today. There's a problem under this castle that needs solving in the next 3 days, and I am the only person who can solve it. After that, he paused. After that, if your ministry still wants to have this conversation, we'll have it. With Tsunade, with Dumbledore, with whatever relevant parties want to be in the room. He picked up the document she'd handed him, folded it cleanly, and gave it back. But not today. He walked into the library. She said his name. He didn't stop. He found Hermione inside at their usual table, and sat down and put his elbows on the table and his face in his hands for a moment. Not from fear, just from the specific fatigue of having to be completely self-possessed in situations that were designed to destabilize you. You heard, he said from behind his hands. I was by the door, she said in a careful voice. Naruto, if she's invoked an emergency ministry classification, can she enforce it? Hermione was quiet in the way she was quiet when the true answer was complicated. Legally, in terms of international magical law, she's on very shaky ground. But the ministry has been consolidating power for 18 months, and Fudge will support whatever she tells him to, and practically speaking, she paused, practically speaking, they could try to enforce it physically whether the legal basis is sound or not. Then they can try, he said. Naruto, he lowered his hands. Hermione, I'm not frightened of them. I'm not going to pretend I am to make the situation more manageable. And I'm not going to let a bureaucratic classification that was invented this morning to justify what she already wanted to do define what I am or what I do. He looked at her steadily. But I'm not going to do something reckless about it either. Tonight we fix the seal problem. Tomorrow we deal with the ministry in that order. She looked at him for a long moment. You're infuriatingly calm about this. I'm very inwardly not calm, he said. I'm just better at this than I used to be. She almost smiled. Fair enough. She slid a parchment across the table. I've been working on the containment shielding for the Great Hall. Can you check the chakra facing side? There's a layer I'm not sure about. He pulled the parchment toward him and they worked. And the library was quiet around them. And outside the snow had settled into the grounds and was staying. And somewhere below them the seal pulsed with increasing frequency, patient and inevitable and almost there. News of the ministry officials traveled through the school at the particular velocity that news traveled at Hogwarts, which was approximately the speed of light if light also went through fireplaces and under doors. By dinner the students knew. By dinner the atmosphere in the Great Hall had a quality Naruto recognized, not anger yet, but the precursor to it, the heated pressure of people who had been told something was wrong and were deciding what to do about it. Harry was quiet through dinner. Not his normal thinking quiet but a different kind with something underneath it that needed acknowledgement before it became pressure. Naruto waited until dessert and said, "Say it." Harry looked at him. "She's going to win eventually," he said, low enough that it was just between them. "Not tonight, not tomorrow, but she's going to keep filing papers and inventing classifications and gradually narrowing what's allowed until..." He stopped. "That's what she's been doing to me for a year. That's how she works." "She won't get the chance," Naruto said. "You can't guarantee that." "No," Naruto said honestly, "but here's the thing about people who win by making the cage smaller. It only works if you stay in the cage." He looked at Harry. "I'm not in her cage, and neither are you if you decide you're not." "I'm a student at her school," Harry said. "She's a temporary placement," Naruto said. "This school is McGonagall and Flitwick and Sprout and Dumbledore and 500 years of students who came through here and left something of themselves. She's been here 5 months." He paused. "She gets to be here as long as she's useful to Fudge and not a day longer. Political appointments only last until the politics change." Harry looked at him. "You think the politics will change?" "He's back," Naruto said simply. "Voldemort, you know it, I know it, most of this room knows it. The ministry can hold that back for a while but not forever. And when it cracks," he shrugged, "she loses her backing and the whole apparatus she's built collapses with it." Harry was quiet for a moment. "And until then," Naruto said, "we do what we're doing, keep moving, keep being what we actually are instead of what they want to classify us as." He looked at Harry. "That's always been the answer, for both of us." Across the table Draco Malfoy was 3 seats down from his usual position at the Slytherin table, and sitting in a way that suggested he'd moved deliberately, not all the way to the Gryffindor table, not anywhere near that, but not quite where he usually was either. He was eating with an expression of concentrated neutrality that Naruto had learned to read as active internal conflict. He'd been doing it since their window seat conversation 3 days ago, moving incrementally in small ways that he could plausibly deny as anything other than what they were. Naruto left him to it. Some journeys needed to be taken at the traveler's own pace. They went down at midnight. All of them this time, Naruto, Tsunade, Harry, Hermione, Dumbledore, and Flitwick, who had arrived with a set of specialized detection instruments that he'd apparently spent the afternoon adapting, and who had the energy of a man who had waited his entire career for a problem this interesting. Neville had asked to come and been brought along because Naruto had learned that Neville Longbottom's instincts were worth having in the room, and also because he'd felt the castle's moods since first year and that was relevant. The chamber was different. The carved floor was luminous now, the lines bright enough to read by, the patterns moving in the slow geological flow that had been invisible at first and was now clearly deliberate. They were cycling through a sequence, the same pattern repeating in expanding rings outward from the center. The eighth layer, visible now, pulsed with warm chakra light that rose and fell with a rhythm that matched Naruto's own heartbeat when he paid attention to it. Dumbledore looked at it with an expression of complete wonder that he'd stopped trying to compose. Flitwick was making sounds. The translation event is close, Kurama said out loud this time, or rather Naruto let Kurama's voice come through in the particular way he'd learned he could when the circumstances warranted it, a deepening of his own voice into something larger. Within 24 hours at the current rate, if we accelerate it we can complete it tonight. That's Kurama, Harry said, not quite as a question. Yeah, Naruto said in his own voice. That's remarkable, Flitwick breathed. He says thank you, Naruto said. I said nothing of the sort, Kurama said at normal Naruto volume. He's grumpy about compliments, Naruto said. I am not grumpy. What do you need? Tsunade said, cutting through this with the precision of someone who had been managing this exact dynamic for months. She looked at Naruto. For the controlled activation, what do you need from us? He walked to the center of the array, the convergence point, and stood on it, feeling the resonance come up through the soles of his feet in rolling waves. I need Hermione and Flitwick at the north and south points. The translation event will discharge in two directions, and if you can hold the magical frequency stable at those points, it'll give the chakra side something to bridge to, rather than just radiating freely. He looked at Dumbledore. I need you at the center with me. Dumbledore blinked. Me specifically. You have the deepest magical connection to this building of anyone here, Naruto said. You're its headmaster, you've been here 40 years, and your magical signature is woven into the castle's wards. If you're at the center point, the castle recognizes you and transmits through you. It'll help the event stay contained to the foundation rather than bleeding upward. Dumbledore moved to the center without a word. Tsunade, Naruto said. I'll manage the discharge overflow, she said, already positioning. If it goes higher than expected, I'll redirect it into the ley line channel before it hits the upper floors. She met his eyes. Don't get lost in there. Define lost, Naruto said. Naruto, I know, he said, I won't. Harry, Neville, she said, turning. You two stand at the east and west points and watch. If anything comes from upstairs, anyone coming down, any cascade from above, you call it immediately. Harry moved to the east point. Neville to the west, and the way Neville moved straight forward without hesitation, taking the position because someone with good judgment had told him it was where he was needed, was a version of himself that hadn't existed at the start of the year and was entirely real now. Naruto stood at the center and breathed. He felt Kurama settle in him, not the usual background presence but forward, alert, vast. The fox in his full awareness was something like standing next to a mountain that had decided to be awake, and Naruto had long since stopped finding it overwhelming and started finding it simply true, the realest thing about himself. Ready? Kurama said. Ready, Naruto said. He let go. Not of control, the opposite. He let go of the careful management that was always running. The continuous low-level regulation of how much chakra was active, how much of Kurama's presence was forward-facing, the meticulous maintenance of boundaries between himself and the fox that kept them functional in a world of ordinary people. He let it all down, not in the chaotic way of someone losing their grip, but in the deliberate way of someone opening a door they trust to lead somewhere real. The chakra came up like a tide. Not destructive, contained, directed, the two of them operating as a single deliberate system rather than a shinobi and a sealed entity in perpetual negotiation. The seal on his stomach ignited, the spiraling characters blazing in the dark, and the resonance from the floor surged to meet it with the eagerness of something that had been waiting 800 years for exactly this frequency. Hermione and Flitwick hit their points simultaneously, their combined magical output laying down the bridge frequency that Naruto had asked for. He felt it as warmth from the north and south, two pillars of stable magical energy holding the translation channel open. Dumbledore's presence at the center was like a root, something deep and connected that the event anchored itself to, the castle recognizing itself in the old wizard's energy and drawing the discharge down and inward rather than up and outward. The eighth layer completed. It was not loud, it was not explosive, it was the opposite, the settling of something enormous into its final position, the way a key feels when it finds the right lock and the tumblers drop, one by one, into alignment. The carved lines of the entire chamber blazed bright enough to see through closed eyelids, and then the brightness found its level, and the hum became something clear and steady and continuous that was neither chakra nor magic but something between them that didn't have a name yet. The translation channel opened. Naruto felt it as a kind of silence underneath the sound, a new register, a frequency that hadn't existed in this world before, running through the ley line network outward from the castle like a root system reaching into deeper soil. The land receiving it. The land slowly beginning to speak back. He came back to himself standing in the center of the lit array with Dumbledore beside him and the chakra settling back into its normal register, Kurama retreating to his usual presence, present vast, unmistakably satisfied. Good, the fox said, and that was all, and it was enough. The chamber held its new light, not the frantic blazing of activation but something settled and steady, like a lamp that had found its correct setting. Hermione was sitting down. Flitwick had his hands pressed together in front of his mouth, and his eyes were bright in a way that said he was processing something large and needed a moment for it. Harry was at the east point with his hand pressed flat on the stone wall looking at it like he was listening for something. Neville said from the west, "The castle's happy." And in the particular stillness of that moment, with the ancient seal finally complete and the translation channel finally open and 800 years of patient engineering finally finding its purpose, Naruto believed him entirely. The morning after was bright, cold, and arrived with the peculiar clarity that followed large events, everything slightly sharper, the world reasserting its details after the big thing had passed. Naruto slept until 8, which was late for him, and woke with the specific feeling of his body having processed something significant overnight. Kurama was deep in the post-activation equivalent of satisfaction, which expressed itself as unusual quietness, and occasionally a warmth in the center of Naruto's chest that the fox would have denied was contentment if pressed. The ministry officials were gone. Dumbledore had, in the early hours of the morning after the activation, sent a very precisely worded letter to the Minister for Magic that McGonagall, delivering it, described as the most courteous threat I have ever read, and I have known Albus for 35 years. The emergency classification had been suspended pending review, which everyone understood to mean it had been quietly walked back because someone in the ministry had received the letter and explained the international sovereignty issue to fudge in terms even he could process. Umbridge was still in the castle. She was at breakfast with the expression of a woman who had been interrupted mid-play and was rethinking her next move. And her eyes on Naruto over the morning porridge were calculating in a new way, not the previous calculation of how do I contain this, but something more tactical than that. He watched her watch him and thought, she's decided the direct approach isn't working. She's going to try something through other channels, through the students. He filed it. What surprised him was Draco. Draco Malfoy walked into the Great Hall at breakfast and sat not at the Slytherin table, not quite at the Gryffindor table. He chose the end of the Hufflepuff table, which was equidistant from both, and which was a choice so deeply symbolic and so carefully structured to avoid being symbolic, that Naruto almost appreciated the architecture of it. Several Slytherins stared. Crabbe and Goyle looked genuinely confused. Pansy Parkinson said something that Naruto didn't catch from across the hall. Draco ate his breakfast with the composed expression of someone who had made a decision, and was not asking for opinions about it. After breakfast, he appeared at Naruto's elbow in the entrance hall with the particular stride of someone approaching a thing they've decided to approach before their nerve fails. "The offer you made," he said, without greeting, without preamble, "to spar." Naruto looked at him, still open. "Tonight, the 7th floor, one of the unused classrooms." He said it like a business arrangement. "And I want," he paused, and this was the part that cost him something, "I want to know about chakra properly, not what I can read in books, which is nothing useful, what it actually is." Naruto looked at him for a moment, taking the measure of what was being offered. Draco Malfoy was not, as some people assumed, stupid. He was also not, as he'd spent years performing, completely his father's creation. He was someone in transition, choosing the direction of it consciously for perhaps the first time. 7th floor, Naruto said. 9 o'clock. Draco nodded, sharp and quick, and walked away before anything else could happen. Harry, who had been standing 6 feet away pretending to look at the notice board, turned around when Draco was gone. "Seriously," he said. "Yeah," Naruto said. "He's been, I know what he's been," Naruto said. He's also the person who sat on the window seat and asked the most honest question he's asked anyone in a long time. He looked at Harry. I don't throw people away for the parts they came from. I've seen what people become when you decide to believe they can. Harry was quiet. He had a face that was working through something, and Naruto waited. Is that why you talked to me like that? Harry said. The first night, in the Great Hall? Partly, Naruto said. Also, you looked like someone who needed someone to just see them, not the scar, not the prophecy, just you. Harry looked at him for a moment with a directness that was still, 3 weeks in, slightly surprising to receive. Harry had the quality of someone who didn't look at things directly if he could help it, except occasionally when his guard was down, and then he looked at everything. It helped, he said. What you said about carrying things alone. Good, Naruto said. I told Ron, Harry said, about the prophecy, all of it, not because I was ready, because you said you don't carry it alone and I realized I'd been. He stopped. He took it better than I expected. Ron usually does, Naruto said. Yeah, a pause. Yeah, he does. The sparring session with Draco happened at 9 and it was not what Draco had expected, which was probably the point. Naruto didn't go hard. He went precise, moving at the level where he could demonstrate clearly, show what he was doing and why, let Draco's natural analytical intelligence do the work of understanding it. He showed him the basic theory of chakra movement, how it ran through the body in channels, what it felt like to push it to the extremities. He showed him slowly the walk-on-water principle, the way surface adhesion worked, chakra as a physical medium. Draco was predictably immediately obsessed with it. He had good physical instincts, better than he'd looked on the Quidditch pitch actually, because on the pitch he was performing Draco Malfoy. In an empty classroom with nobody watching, he moved with the economical efficiency of someone who had, at some point in his development, been trained seriously. His father probably, or someone his father had hired. The training was old-style European dueling tradition, and the habits it had left were not all useful, but the underlying physical intelligence was real. You're holding your weight too far back, Naruto said, circling. Your center of gravity is defensive, you're always preparing to retreat. Retreat has its uses, Draco said, which was both true and a window into something. Sure, Naruto said, but you can't choose to advance from that position. You can only defend or fall back. Advance requires center. He moved slow enough to watch, showing the weight transfer. Here, try it. Draco tried it. He got it wrong twice and then right on the third attempt. And his face when he got it right was entirely unguarded, not the satisfaction of performance but the deeper thing, the pleasure of understanding something true. After sitting on the floor in the quiet classroom, Draco said, Does chakra change you? Using it. It's already part of you, Naruto said. Using it more doesn't change you, it just makes more of you available. Draco looked at his hands. And the fox. How long did it take you to not be afraid of him? Naruto said. A while, to actually trust him. Years. He paused. To understand that we were the same thing by then, a bit after that. He looked at Draco. The thing you're carrying, the expectations, the name, the direction it's all supposed to go in, that's your Kurama. You can fight it your whole life or you can figure out what you actually have in common and work from there. Draco was quiet for a long time. The classroom was dark except for the torches, and outside the windows Scotland was deep in winter night, the stars clear above the snow. My father, Draco said finally, believes in something. He's wrong about almost everything, but he actually believes in it, and I used to. He stopped. I used to believe he was right, not about all of it, but enough of it. A pause. I don't anymore. And it feels like, he made a gesture that was helpless in a way his hands almost never were, like losing something even though the thing I'm losing was never good. Does that make sense? Yes, Naruto said, that's grief. Draco looked at him, for something that was wrong. Grief doesn't care if it was right, Naruto said. You're losing a version of yourself that was cert. The new version is less cert and that's actually better, but it doesn't feel like it right now. He looked at him. That feeling doesn't mean you're going the wrong way. Outside the castle, the ley lines ran through their ancient geography, carrying their new frequency outward from the chamber below. The seal, complete, finally complete, 800 years of waiting resolved into the steady hum of something that had found its purpose, pulsed gently in the bedrock. And in the castle above it, in classrooms and dormitories and corridors, in the specific gravity of a place that had seen generation after generation of young people arrive uncertain and leave something more, things were, quietly and then not so quietly, beginning to shift. Umbridge looked at her window from her office. She was writing something that was not for Dumbledore and not for the Ministry record that anyone would see. She was writing for Fudge directly, and what she was writing was not about the seal or the chakra or the dimensional rift. It was about Harry Potter. She had found her other channel, the one that went around Naruto's immunity to her leverage, and it went exactly where it had always gone. She had decided that if she couldn't remove the disruptive element, she would remove what the disruptive element was here to protect. She folded the letter and sealed it and sent it by her own owl, not the school's. And the castle, which had been partly alive for 800 years and was more alive now than it had been in decades, felt the letter leave, and the feeling it carried through its stones that night was not alarm, it was readiness. Chapter 6. What we leave behind. The rift home opened on a Thursday morning and nobody was ready for it. Not Naruto, who had been in the middle of breakfast. Not Tsunade, who had been in the hospital wing doing rounds. Not Dumbledore, who appeared in the Great Hall doorway 40 seconds after the chakra signature spiked with the expression of a man who had been expecting this, but had still been caught by when. The rift appeared in the air above the courtyard outside the library windows, not the violent tearing of the original, not mud and screaming and a scroll's dying wish, but a clean vertical seam in reality, warm gold at the edges pulling slightly at the air around it the way a heat source pulled. It pulsed. It was stable. It was waiting. Kurama said very quietly, "There it is." Naruto sat with his spoon halfway to his mouth and looked at it through the window and felt something complicated happen in his chest that he didn't immediately have a name for. The table around him went still, Harry first, then Ron, then Hermione, the four of them tracking his eyes to the courtyard window and understanding what they were looking at without being told. Because Hermione had read enough about dimensional compression seals to recognize the signature, and Harry had been watching Naruto for weeks and knew the expression he was wearing now. Hermione said, "How long will it stay stable?" He reached for Kurama. "Hours," the fox said. "The translation channel we opened, it's been running the seal's outgoing frequency through the ley lines. The ley network carried it to the dimensional convergence point. The pathway home settled naturally. It'll hold for most of the day but not past tonight." "Most of the day," Naruto said to the table. Nobody said anything. The silence had a specific quality, not empty but full of things people were trying to decide whether to say. Ron said it first. "So you could leave today?" "Yes," Naruto said. Ron nodded once carefully with the expression of someone working very hard to be reasonable about something unreasonable. Naruto set down his spoon and pushed his chair back and went to find Tsunade. She was standing at the hospital wing window when he arrived, which meant she'd seen it from there, which meant she'd been standing at the window for the last 4 minutes deciding how she felt about it. He knew her well enough to know that 4 minutes of window standing was either very good news or very complicated news for the person standing there, and the angle of her shoulders told him which. "It opened," he said. "I can see that," she said. "Kurama says it'll hold until tonight." She was quiet for a moment. Pomfrey moved quietly in the background, doing the particular deliberate busyness of someone giving space while staying nearby in case it was needed, which Naruto had decided was one of her most underrated qualities. Tsunade's reflection in the glass was doing more work than her face. "The 3 students in the East Wing," she said, finally. "I haven't finished the full energetic recalibration. The translation channel is stable but their sensitivity is still elevated. It should normalize over 3 or 4 weeks, but someone needs to monitor it and know what to watch for." "Pomfrey knows what to watch for," Naruto said. "She does now?" Tsunade's hand moved against the windowsill, a small restless gesture she rarely made. "The methodology we developed together, the hybrid diagnostic approach, it needs documentation, proper documentation, not my shorthand notes." "How long would that take, if I don't sleep 2 days? "Tsunade, I know," she said. "I know we can't wait 2 days." She turned from the window and looked at him, and her amber eyes were doing the thing where they were completely honest and completely composed simultaneously, which was the hardest thing she did and the thing she was best at. "Poppy is more than capable of finishing it from my notes. I'll be specific." She paused. "I already started writing it this morning," he looked at her. "Before you knew the rift was open, a beat. I started it last night." She'd known it was coming. She'd felt it in the seal the same way he had, and she'd spent the night writing up a 2-day job's worth of medical methodology in the hours before dawn, and she was standing at the window now not because she didn't know what she was going to do but because she'd already decided and she was giving herself a moment to feel it before it became the past. "We're going home," he said. "We're going home," she agreed. She said it simply, and it was the right word and also not quite the whole truth, because home was Konoha and Konoha was real and they needed to go back to it, but something in the word home had also, somewhere in the last 3 weeks, quietly and without announcement, Included the hospital wing and the library and the castle's breathing stones and a small energetic healer who argued beautifully and a very small charms professor with the enthusiasm of someone who had found a second life in a new problem. She didn't say that part. She didn't need to, he knew. He went to find Harry. Harry was in the corridor outside the Great Hall, which meant he'd left the table and come here to wait, which meant he'd known Naruto would come find him. He had his arms crossed and his back against the stone, and he was looking at the floor with the careful non-expression of someone who had decided what their face was going to do and was enforcing it. Naruto stopped in front of him. So, Harry said, not looking up. So, Naruto said. Harry looked up. The careful non-expression had developed a crack in it that was something closer to the thing underneath. You're going. I have to. I know. Quick. I know I'm not. He stopped, reset. I know you have a village, people who need you. I know. He looked at the floor again, then back up, and this time he let the crack be what it was. It's just you've been here 3 weeks and it's different. He stopped again. I don't know how to explain it. You don't have to explain it, Naruto said. You showed me something, Harry said, quietly and directly. About what it looks like to carry something enormous and still choose to be yourself. Not the thing people need you to be, not the symbol, just, he made a frustrated gesture with his hand, just a person. I didn't know you could do that, be a person through it. He paused. I needed to see that. Naruto looked at him for a moment. Thought about the hats assessment 3 weeks ago. A boy who has been carrying his loneliness so long he's forgotten it has a shape. Thought about who was standing in front of him now, 3 weeks later. A person who had told his best friend the truth about a prophecy and let himself be seen and was standing here without armor having a hard conversation with someone he'd known for 3 weeks and trusted entirely. You already knew, Naruto said. Everything I showed you, it was already in you. I just gave you permission to look at it. Harry shook his head. It's not, Harry, he met his eyes. You've been surviving this your whole life. Every year something impossible and you're still here. That's not luck and it's not the prophecy, that's you. He held Harry's gaze. I didn't give you anything you didn't already have. The crack in Harry's expression became something that was not crying but was adjacent to it in the way a river was adjacent to the sea, related, moving in the same direction. He breathed through it and Naruto waited, and after a moment Harry straightened and nodded, one sharp, decisive movement. Okay, he said. Okay, Naruto said. If you ever come back, Harry said, and I know that's, if I ever come back, Naruto said, I'll find you first. Harry almost smiled. I'll leave a light on. They stood there for a moment in the quiet corridor, and it was enough, and then they walked back toward the Great Hall together to eat the rest of breakfast because there was still a day to get through and a lot of things to do in it, and some things were best followed by the ordinary continuity of food and conversation. Dumbledore called a full staff meeting at 9 in the morning, which was the first time he'd done that since the year started, and the reason was clear to everyone before he explained it. He needed to brief the teachers on the seal activation and the translation channel, and the fact that the castle was going to behave somewhat differently over the coming weeks as the two energy systems continued their gradual alignment. Tsunade presented the medical side, brisk and precise and comprehensive, with Pomfrey providing supplementary detail in the places where Tsunade's notes were in shorthand. Flitwick presented the magical mechanics side, with the barely contained enthusiasm of someone who had been waiting to talk about this for days. Naruto sat at the back and watched the faces. McGonagall's expression moved from skepticism through careful attention to the particular set of jaw that meant she'd arrived at acceptance of something she wouldn't have believed a month ago, but was choosing to trust because the evidence was coherent, and the people presenting it had demonstrated consistent reliability. She looked at Tsunade and said, the 3 sensitized students, their curricular accommodations during the recalibration period. And Tsunade already had a document for that, which she slid across the table, and McGonagall picked it up and read it, and her expression said this is thorough in the way it said things she respected. Sprout asked questions about whether the ley line activation would affect the magical properties of the soil in the greenhouses, which was an extraordinarily practical question that nobody else had thought to ask. And Tsunade and Flitwick spent 15 minutes on it together with the energy of 2 people who had found another corner of the problem to enjoy. Umbridge was in the staff meeting because she was technically staff, and she sat at her end of the table with her clipboard and said nothing. She had said nothing since breakfast. She was sitting with the composed stillness of someone who had made a move and was waiting to find out if it had worked, and the composure of it was so deliberate that it was itself a tell. Naruto watched her and waited. The meeting ended. He followed Dumbledore out. She sent a letter yesterday, he said as they walked, not a question. Yes, Dumbledore said, to Fudge, not through the school owls. Also yes, Dumbledore walked with his hands behind his back unhurried, and his voice had the quality of someone who had already dealt with what he was describing and was reporting from the other side of it. She's petitioned for Harry's immediate transfer to a ministry facility for the wording is assessment of prophecy-related psychological instability. The petition invokes the Emergency Powers Act that was passed in September. Naruto stopped walking. She's trying to take Harry. She tried, Dumbledore said, turning. The petition was received at 6 this morning. By 7:30 I had spoken with 12 members of the Wisengamot, 3 of whom are parents of current students, 4 of whom have particular views about the ministry's overreach in educational matters, and 2 of whom simply dislike fudge. The petition has been blocked pending a full Wisengamot review. He paused. She doesn't know this yet. When will she find out? The formal notification arrives by owl this afternoon. Dumbledore's eyes were clear and completely serious. But the more important issue is that this attempt tells us something. She's shifted from trying to contain external threats to targeting students directly. That's a different kind of danger, and it means, he paused, it means her presence here has become untenable, which I intend to address today. You're removing her. I'm presenting the governor's board with a comprehensive record of her conduct since September that several parents have been compiling, along with my own documentation and requesting her immediate placement review. Something moved in his expression, not satisfaction but resolution. I should have done it sooner. I have a habit of managing rather than deciding, Naruto said. He said it without accusation. He'd said something like it to Dumbledore directly last week, and Dumbledore had heard it then, and hearing it again now he nodded with the particular nod of someone who has made peace with a truth about themselves. Yes, he said, I'm deciding now. Naruto looked at him. She's not going to go quietly. No, Dumbledore said, she isn't. She didn't. The ministry owl arrived at lunch. Every table saw it happen. The ministry owl landing in front of Umbridge with the formality of an official communication, Umbridge opening it, reading it, her face passing through a sequence of emotions in rapid succession that ended at something that was not soft in any way the pink surrounding it suggested. She stood up from the staff table with her clipboard and her smile replaced by something that no longer felt the need to perform, and walked out of the great hall in the precise measured stride of a person who had decided that precision was the last thing she had control over. The hall exhaled. Then, 2 minutes later, the sound from the corridor. It was not a spell, not the crack of magic, nothing destructive. It was voices, elevated, and one of them was Umbridge and the other one was McGonagall, and the quality of it was the particular quality of a confrontation that had been developing for months and had finally found its moment. Naruto was at the door before he decided to stand up, Harry and Ron 2 steps behind him, and in the corridor outside the Great Hall was Dolor's Umbridge standing in front of McGonagall with a document in her hand and her voice at a pitch it had never reached in his presence. The authority of the High Inquisitor supersedes the headmaster's. The High Inquisitor position, McGonagall said, with the particular clipped precision of someone choosing each word for maximum effect, requires a Wisengamot majority vote to maintain, which as of 30 minutes ago it no longer has. Umbridge's face. That vote has not been, it has been confirmed, I have the notification here. McGonagall produced a document from somewhere in her robes with the efficiency of someone who had been carrying it specifically for this moment. Your authority as High Inquisitor is suspended pending the full review. You retain your status as defense against the dark arts teacher pending the review's completion. This is, Umbridge's voice had shed the sweetness entirely, and what was underneath it was harder and colder and more honest, and Naruto thought, there you are. This is Dumbledore's doing. This is political interference with a legitimate ministry, Professor Umbridge. Dumbledore had appeared from the direction of his office with the unhurried finality of a man who had done what needed doing and was simply present for the result. The students have lunch. It was not a threat. It was not a command. It was delivered in the warm, entirely implacable voice he used when the conversation was over and he decided it was. Umbridge looked at him, at McGonagall, at the students spilling into the corridor, not just Naruto and Harry and Ron, but half the great hall drawn by the voices, Hermione with her hand on Neville's arm, Ginny on her toes to see over someone's shoulder, second and third years packed against the walls. And from the direction of the dungeons, Draco Malfoy standing at the corridor's edge with his arms at his sides and his expression the new one, the one that wasn't performing anything. Umbridge looked at all of it. At the walls and the portraits and the students and the headmaster and the deputy headmistress, and the fact that the castle itself seemed to be paying attention in the particular way it did now, the subtle quality of a building that had learned to receive information. She walked away. Not forever, the review would take time, and she'd fight it at every stage, and Naruto knew better than to mistake a retreat for a surrender. But she walked away from this corridor on this day, and the students watched her go with the collective held breath of people who had been waiting for exactly this, and then the breath released all at once and the corridor was loud again. Harry was beside him. "Is it over?" he said. "For today," Naruto said. "But eventually Fudge's position becomes unsustainable and Umbridge's authority goes with it, and what comes after that is it's going to be harder, Harry. What comes after is the war she was running cover for." He looked at him. "That's not my fight, not my world, but it's yours and you're ready for it." He paused. "More ready than you were 3 weeks ago." Harry was quiet. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I think I am." The afternoon passed in the particular quality of a day that knows its ending, events arriving with the heightened clarity of last times, conversations holding a note longer than usual. Naruto moved through the castle saying goodbye the way he moved through most things, which was directly and without ceremony but not without meaning. Flitwick caught him in the charms corridor and shook his hand for a long time, which for someone of his stature required a certain commitment of both arms. He pressed a scroll of notes into Naruto's hands, his and Hermione's combined documentation of the chakra to magical energy translation mechanics, written up properly with diagrams and the 3 variant translation frequencies they'd identified during the activation. "For your people," he said, "in case anyone there wants to explore it from the other side." His eyes were bright. "This what happened in this castle. This is the kind of thing that only happens once in a generation. Maybe once in a century." He paused. "Thank you for letting me be here for it." Naruto looked at him, small, warm, a man who had spent his whole life finding the edges of what was possible and pressing on them, and said, "Thank you for keeping up." Flitwick laughed genuinely, the full-body laugh of someone who found things funny in the specific way that meant they'd earned the joy in it. Sprout gave him seeds. He didn't know what they were, and she explained with the patience of someone who had been explaining plant things to people who didn't know plants for 30 years, and he understood approximately 60% of it, and stored the seeds carefully in the inside pocket of his jacket because she had handed them over with the expression of someone giving something real. McGonagall stopped him in the entrance hall. She looked at him for a moment with the assessing attention she used. The quality that he'd learned in 3 weeks was not severity but precision. She was precise in everything, including how she saw people, and when she'd seen something, she was direct about what she'd seen. "You are," she said, "the most unconventional student this school has ever had." "I wasn't technically a student," he said. "You were more a student than half the students," she said. "In the ways that matter." A pause. "What you did in that defense class, what you've been doing all term in corridors and at mealtimes and in the middle of Quidditch matches, that was teaching, good teaching." Her chin lifted slightly. "Come back if you can." "I will," he said, and meant it. She nodded once and went back to wherever she'd been going, because McGonagall expressed warmth the way she expressed everything, with complete and efficient conviction, leaving no ambiguity about its reality and no performance around its delivery. He found Neville in the greenhouse at 4 o'clock, which is where Neville always was at 4 o'clock because Neville had decided schedules were important and greenhouses were important, and he intended to be important in the greenhouse at 4 o'clock for as long as he was at Hogwarts. "I wanted to say goodbye," Naruto said. Neville looked up from the plant he was examining, which appeared to be arguing with him. "I know," he said. "The castle will keep talking to you," Naruto said. "The translation channel is stable. It's going to become background noise eventually, but right now it's still adjusting, and if it feels different, I'll tell someone." Neville looked at him with the steady directness that had been there all along, underneath the nervousness, waiting for the nervous to burn off. "I know what to watch for now." "Yeah," Naruto said, "you do." Neville set down his plant and looked at Naruto with the expression he got when he was going to say something he'd been thinking about for a while. "You treated me like someone who could handle things," he said, "from the beginning. Not like I needed to be managed." He paused. "I'm going to be better because of that, I wanted you to know." Naruto looked at him, at the boy who had frozen every time on the first beat and now didn't, who had taken the West Point in the chamber without hesitation, who had told the room about the fireplace threat when nobody else had said it and not retracted it when people turned to look. He looked at Neville Longbottom and thought, there's someone the world hasn't caught up to yet. "I know," Naruto said. "I've seen it." Draco was in the 7th floor corridor, which was not where Draco was supposed to be at 4:30 and was therefore where Naruto had known to look. He was standing at the window where they'd sat on the window seat, looking at the grounds below where the snow was turning the late afternoon light into something gold and blue. He didn't look around when Naruto stopped beside him. But he'd known Naruto was coming because Draco Malfoy noticed everything that happened near him always, the survival instinct of someone raised in rooms where attention to small changes was protection. "You're leaving," Draco said. "The rift closes tonight." Draco was quiet for a moment. "The Hufflepuff table," he said, which was not what Naruto had expected. "The other day I sat there." "I know," Pansy said. "I was having some kind of breakdown." He paused. "She's not wrong that it's a kind of break." His hand was on the windowsill. "I don't know what I'm doing yet." "You don't have to know," Naruto said. "You just have to keep doing the honest thing. One at a time, the shape of it becomes clear later." Draco looked at him then sideways with the expression that was his actual expression, not the mask, not the performance, the real thing underneath, which was sharper and more uncertain and more interesting than the performance had ever been. "You think I can?" It wasn't a question. It was a request for someone to have decided in advance that he could, so that when it was hard he could borrow the certainty. Naruto recognized the request. He'd made it himself once to Uruka across a bowl of ramen, a small broken child needing someone to have already chosen to believe in him. He knew what it meant to have someone say yes without qualification. "I've already decided that," Naruto said. "So yes." Draco looked back out the window. His hand on the sill tightened for a moment and then released. "Thank you," he said quietly and precisely the way he did things when he meant them entirely. He said it to the window. That was fine. Naruto said any time and left him there. Tsunade finished the documentation at 6. She handed it to Pomfrey in the hospital wing, and Pomfrey took it with both hands and looked at it and then looked at Tsunade with an expression that was doing a great deal of work holding itself together. "This is everything," Pomfrey said. "It's enough to get started," Tsunade said. "You'll find gaps as you work with it, write them down, and if you can find a way to send correspondence across." She glanced at Dumbledore, who was in the doorway. "He can work out the mechanism. Eventually." "I will find a mechanism," Dumbledore said serenely. Tsunade looked at Pomfrey for a moment with the directness that was always her baseline, and in this moment held something additional, something that she wasn't going to name in front of the headmaster. "You're a good healer, Poppy," she said. "One of the best I've worked with, and I've worked with people who could have walked on water if they hadn't been too tired from everything else." Pomfrey set the documentation down and did the thing that Tsunade had not anticipated, which was that she hugged her. Briefly, firmly, with no preamble and no apology. Tsunade stood very still for exactly 2 seconds, and then something in her posture changed into the posture of someone who had decided once more to let themselves receive something. She patted Pomfrey's shoulder, once, precisely. "Mind the translation channel," she said when Pomfrey stepped back. "It'll fluctuate for 2 weeks before it fully stabilizes. Normal." "I know," Pomfrey said. "I've written it down." They met in the courtyard at 7, Naruto and Tsunade, and somehow within 10 minutes everyone else. Not because Naruto had told them to come, but because Hogwarts was 300 students and a great deal of ambient information flow, and everyone who had reason to be there found their way to the courtyard as the evening settled over the grounds and the rift stood in the cold air above the stones, patient and gold-edged and waiting. It was cold. The kind of cold that Scotland apparently considered normal, and the rest of the world would have described as rude. The castle behind them was lit warm in its windows, and the lake beyond the grounds was flat and black under a clear winter sky. Harry was there and Ron, and Hermione with her coat pulled around her and her notebook clutched to her chest like a talisman. Neville, Ginny, Dean, Seamus, Hannah, Susan Bones, who had come down from the upper ward with the stubborn mobility of someone who had decided they were fine whether or not they were fully fine. Flitwick and Sprout and McGonagall. Pomfrey with red eyes she was absolutely not acknowledging. Dumbledore. And at the edge of the group, not quite in it but not in it, Draco Malfoy with his hands in his pockets and his expression the new one. Naruto looked at all of them. He'd never been good at goodbyes, not because they didn't matter to him, but because they mattered too much, because every person in front of him had become real to him in the way that all people became real when you paid full attention to them, and paying full attention was the only way he knew how to be anywhere. "I'm terrible at speeches," he said. "We know," Ron said. Hermione said. "Ron, no, he's right," Naruto said and grinned. "So I'll just say what's true." He looked at the group, at each face in it, and he meant each part individually as he said the whole thing together. "You're going to be okay, not because the war is going to be easy or short or without cost. It won't be, but because you're the kind of people who get back up and you keep being that kind of people even when it's hard to remember, and that's," he paused, "that's everything actually. That's the whole thing." Harry was looking at him with those careful green eyes and didn't say anything, but said everything. Because Harry Potter had learned in 3 weeks to let what he felt be visible, and he was letting it be visible now, and it was friendship in the cleanest, most uncomplicated form, the kind that didn't require history or explanation, just recognition. Naruto reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and took out his Konoha headband. He'd been thinking about this for 2 days, whether to do it, what it meant, whether the gesture was too much or too little. He decided it was the right gesture because it was the truest one, and true things were worth doing even when they were big. He looked at Harry. The headband is in my village, it's everything. It's your identity, your commitment to your people, your place in something larger than yourself. He held it for a moment. I'm not leaving mine, I have another. He held it out. But I want you to have something real from where I come from, so you know it's actually a place. And so you know someone from it chose you. Harry took it. He turned it over in his hands, the metal plate, the spiral of Konohagakure, the cloth that had been sun-bleached and washed and tied to Naruto's forehead through 100 things that mattered. He looked up. I'll take care of it. I know, Naruto said. You take care of everything. Hermione made a sound that was not a sob and was not a sob. Ron's ears were red. Ginny was looking at the sky with the expression of someone maintaining composure through sheer structural willpower. Tsunade put her hand on Naruto's shoulder once, and it was both ready and the thing that said ready and meant everything between them that didn't need to be said. He looked at Dumbledore. The old wizard was watching him with those bright blue eyes that had known things for a long time and had the grace to let them be complicated. The seal is complete, Naruto said. The translation channel is stable. The navigator's work is finished. He paused. Whatever he intended this for, I hope it serves you well. It already has, Dumbledore said, more than I could measure. He paused and then said something that Naruto hadn't expected. I have lived a very long time and made a great many mistakes and known a great many extraordinary people. His voice was unhurried and entirely direct. You are one of the finest I have encountered. In any sense of the word fine. He tilted his head. The Hidden Leaf Village is fortunate in you. Naruto looked at him for a moment. I'm going to tell them you said that. Please do, Dumbledore said. Naruto turned to the rift. It was warm at the edges, the same gold it had been all day, and through it he could see not clearly, not in detail, but in the way you saw something through very clean water, the quality of light that was different from Scotland's Konoha light. Warmer, more direct, the particular quality of fire country in winter. Home, Kurama said. Yeah, Naruto said. He stepped through. The transition was nothing like the arrival had been. No mud, no cold, no screaming scroll. Just a step and a warmth and the specific quality of familiar air that the body recognized before the brain did. He felt Konoha before he saw it, the chakra signatures of hundreds of people he knew, faint at distance but present, the collective hum of his village going about its existence. He came out on the roof of the Hokage administration building, which was undignified but better than the alternatives, and stood in the late evening air of the Hidden Leaf Village and looked at it spread below him, the rooftops and the training grounds and the monument cut into the mountain with the 4 faces looking over everything, and his face was going to be up there one day, and he'd known it since he was 12 years old and never doubted it once. Tsunade came through behind him and landed beside him with the same impossible composure she'd landed with on that Scottish hillside 3 weeks ago. She stood and looked at the village, and the evening in her face did something that it rarely did, which was to simply feel the thing it was feeling without any kind of management. She was home. After a moment she said, we need to debrief with the council. Tonight, tomorrow morning, she said. Tonight she paused. Tonight we eat somewhere with actual proper food and I sleep in my own bed. Ramen, he said. She looked at him. Obviously ramen, he grinned. She almost smiled. They climbed down from the roof and walked through the village, and it was exactly as it had always been and also not quite. Because he was not quite the same person who had left, and the space between who he'd been and who he was now was 3 weeks and 300 students and a chamber full of ancient ceiling work, and a boy with a scar on his forehead who had learned to say what he felt, and all of it was real. In the Hogwarts courtyard, the rift closed at 7:43, folding back into nothing with the clean finality of a door shutting. The courtyard went dark without the gold of it. Everyone stood for a moment in the cold, looking at the space where it had been. Harry stood with the headband in his hands. He looked at it for a long time, at the spiral that was a different kind of symbol from the lightning bolt on his forehead, a mark put there by choice rather than catastrophe. He put it in his coat pocket and felt the weight of it there, real and specific. Ron put his arm around Harry's shoulders, Hermione on his other side. The 3 of them stood in the courtyard, and around them the castle breathed its new breathing, the translation channel humming below their feet in its steady bilateral frequency, something that had not existed 3 weeks ago and would exist now for as long as the castle stood. Dumbledore looked at the sky for a moment. Then he turned toward the castle and walked back inside. McGonagall was the last to go in, and she paused in the doorway and looked at the courtyard once more, at the empty air above the stones and the students filing back through the warmth of the entrance hall. And something in her expression was not grief and not relief but the word that lived between them. The word for when something significant has passed through and left the world different in ways that take time to fully understand. She went in. In the dungeons, Draco Malfoy walked not to the Slytherin common room but to the window at the end of the east corridor, the one that faced the direction the rift had been, though he couldn't see the courtyard from here. He stood at it for a while. Then he turned and walked back to the common room and sat down in a chair that was not the chair he usually sat in and opened his potions textbook and began to study. And the studying was real, and the chair was real, and all of it was one more step in the direction of something he couldn't name yet and didn't need to. In the hospital wing, Susan Bones and Hannah Abbott were playing cards. Susan's magical signature was slowly, incrementally returning to its normal register. She would be fine in 2 weeks, which was what Tsunade's documentation said, which was what Pomfrey had told her, and she believed it because Pomfrey believed it, and Pomfrey's belief in things had a specific quality of certainty that made belief in turn reliable. In the Gryffindor common room, Hermione sat at the desk by the window and opened her notebook to a fresh page and wrote, at the top, Chakra-based energy systems, a preliminary integration with European magical theory. She looked at it for a moment, at the words she'd just written and what they would become and how long it would take her to write them fully. Then she picked up her quill. The castle breathed. The ley lines carried their new frequency out through the cold Scottish ground reaching. The ancient seal, complete, finally irreversibly complete, held its light in the deep stones, warm and steady, no longer waiting. Done now, arrived. And in the hidden leaf village, in a ramen booth that smelled of broth and steam and the specific comfortable smell of a place that knew you, Naruto Uzumaki sat across from Tsunade and ate the best bowl of ramen he'd had in 3 weeks while she drank her sake and made notes for the council debrief. And outside the village went about its evening and the stars came out over Fire Country. He thought about Harry with the headband in his pocket. He thought about Neville in the greenhouse telling the Tentacula to cooperate. He thought about a small charms professor with his hands pressed together in wonder and a stone chamber lit with 800 years of patience finally paid off. He thought about a window seat on a Scottish night and a boy who'd been performing a part asking the most important question of his life. He thought about a navigator named Hiroshi who had read the future in the energy of the earth and trusted it enough to spend years building something for someone he'd never meet, writing a letter to the school itself, confident that the school would know when to give it to the right person. We're the same, he thought, and didn't know exactly who he meant by we anymore and decided that was fine, that was good, that the expanding definition of we was the whole point of being the person he was. Good, Kurama said and meant it. He finished his ramen. He ordered another bowl. On a windowsill in Gryffindor Tower where he'd left it that morning before breakfast without quite knowing he was going to, there was a note in Naruto's handwriting. Short, direct, the way he did things. Harry, you already know what to do, you always have, just remember you're not doing it alone. NPS, tell Ron the cannons have a decent keeper this season. He'll know what that means. The candle beside the windowsill burned through the evening and then guttered and went out. And the headband in Harry's pocket was warm from being carried close. And the castle held its light in the deep stones. And the night settled over Hogwarts the way nights had settled over it for 1,000 years, ancient and patient and absolutely certain that what it held within its walls mattered, that the people who passed through it carried the marks of it forward into the world. That every extraordinary thing that happened here became part of what the school was made of, permanent as stone, which it was, which it always had been, which now it was a little more.